Hello, hello. Welcome to A Murderous Heart. I'm not going to go into detail about the purpose of this channel. I will create a video where I'll talk about that, and I'll actually upload that to my analytics channel just to kind of give people a heads up that I'm moving. I am coming back to YouTube. I am here to stay. I really have my Facebook group to thank for that. It's been kind of a triage, and my amazing mods. Having said that, I am just going to jump right in. We have a lot to cover tonight. I trust my mods will let me know if there's a problem, but I don't have my phone by me. So can everyone hear me? Oh, I think so. So, okay, great. I am going to share my screen. Hello, everybody. Okay. Okay, great. Let's just jump right in. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about Adam Cox. We're going to be delving into what the FOIA docs, FOIA is short for Freedom of Information Act, what they have to say about Adam and his involvement. I use the word involvement loosely. I don't think he was involved in any of the deaths or anything like that. But he is a player in all of this. And although I am very grateful for all of the shows that have been done around my family's case, I realize just what a privilege that is. And they've done the case justice in so many ways. I've met some of the most amazing people through this case. I'm supremely grateful for my Facebook group. I mean, I really stand on the shoulders of giants, and I said I wasn't going to do this, so I'm going to move on. So I am going to try to be as gracious as possible while being fair to the facts. And over the past couple of years, I've been chasing down the facts. I've built out a timeline. I've built out a dashboard, and I've been digging into this case because I want to know what the facts are. And I do feel like, as wonderful as these shows have been, and my favorite is Dateline, I think they've done like just a supreme job in really chasing down the details and kind of keeping some of the sentimentality to a minimum. I do feel like there's a lot more to the story that the FOIA docs tells us. And so that's what I'm going to attempt to do as graciously yet honestly as possible. I'm certainly not trying to wreck anyone's day or cause other family members more pain. They've been through a lot. Having said that, let's jump in. Okay, just a quick plug. If you don't know, I am Joseph Ryan's sister, Tylee's aunt. I do believe that Joe was most likely Lori's first victim. Excuse me. I went into a deep dive in a video about that, and I started a petition. I don't think that Phoenix police is particularly moved by this petition. However, I've watched enough true crime over the past 20 years. I've seen cases from the 40s and 50s get picked back up. So who knows? I'm not a Pollyanna. I'm very much a realist, but I do believe that at some point, someone could come along with some fire in his or her belly and take a second look at this case. I do not think that justice has been done in the fact that there has never been an investigation. I won't go into it, but if you are so inclined, I would be very grateful for you to sign the petition. You can go to bit.ly JSTC for Justice for Joe. Okay. Let's jump in now. All right. So the first point is this may not have been as much of a surprise to others as it was to me, but Adam was privy to a very detailed plan to murder Joe. And so we're going to listen to a snippet of that.
I don't know how you can prove it or what the proof can be. That's the whole problem. Is I'm sure they plan. I don't know if you can, if they've ever emailed each other or text each other, or they just plan this out by just talking. I don't know, but there's got to be somewhere where they've talked this through, because Lori and Alex planned Joe's death, and Lori found out that Joe molested her kids supposedly, and Alex got upset, and Al said, I'll take care of him. And then they planned out how they were going to kill Joe. And Al was going to taser him, throw him in the trunk, and take him out to a field and shoot him, and then bury him. Well, Al went to taser him, and it didn't work, and Joe called the cops, and Al went to jail for 12 months.
Okay, so I saw that there are some comments about buffering. I just want to check really quickly to make sure I'm on the right network, and I am not. Name. Okay. Hopefully you can hear this. Let me just refresh this just to make sure. Okay, we're good. Hopefully this will reduce the buffering. Okay, so I make the point. I dropped some comments in some of these slides. There is something tragically broken in this family. Adam is not saying in this was an interview that he had done with Detective Moffat from Chandler Police. I will talk more about the odd timing of this interview. He was not quick to come forward. Let's just say that. And I'll address that more in a few minutes. But he's not just saying here that he believed that Lori, his sister, and Alex, his brother, just had a role to play. He goes into very specific detail about what the plan was, and it was to stun gun him. We know that Alex did taser Joe, but then it was to throw him in the trunk and take him to a desert, shoot him, or take him out in the middle of nowhere and shoot him, and then bury him. And Joe just would have been missing. And I just think that is incredibly odd and and suspicious. This isn't in my, and I might be connecting dots that shouldn't be connected. I do try to really be fair, but he's not just saying, he's not sharing this, I believe, from the perspective of hearing this after the fact. I don't think, given the fact that Alex was caught, he wasn't successful in murdering Joe, thankfully, at least not at that point. But this isn't something that it wouldn't make much sense that they would divulge these details after failing the mission. It really seems like Adam was quite possibly in on this plan. And this is one of the scarlet threads that you see in this story, where this family, in my opinion, they just do not put a high premium on human life. So the other thing that really got my attention with this is the timing. So I came across pictures from the vacation that we went on with Lori, Adam, and Charles and Adam's wife. and just a boatload of kids. It was in 2007, and I was under the impression that this was in June because when I looked at my family photo albums, it was before pictures. The pictures from that vacation were before pictures from the 4th of July. However, this was before the days of where you were taking pictures on your phone and stuff, and so I might catch up on pictures like once a year or even once every couple years, and I would put my pictures in chronological order, or according to my memory. However, when I engaged on this project of digitizing all of my photos from the early 90s on, I came across the pictures from this vacation and saw that on what was most likely the first picture from the trip, there was a date stamp. And now I can't find the picture, but I did send it to Janice, and she doesn't have it. I don't have it because of new phones and things like that. And I think that it just got separated from the rest of the pictures, which were digitized. But I do have several texts where I sent one to the producer for Dateline and another one to Janice, where I did mention that the timestamp on that first picture, where I obviously had realized that there was this, time date stamp on the picture, and I turned it off because back in the day, cameras defaulted to adding these obnoxious timestamps to your pictures. So I think it was the first picture of the vacation, and the date on that was July 20th. Now, that is significant, and I will get into why that is significant. So just kind of keep that in mind.
How you can prove it or what.
So, first day of the vacation, July 20th. It was a very, very fun trip. And Adam was absolutely delightful. My kids loved him. This is my son. And he was like stuck to Adam like white on rice. He wanted to dress like him. He stood like him. He was just kind of like by his side all the time. Here is a clip from this vacation where you can see just how fun Adam was. Okay, so whoops. And here was a picture. This picture really demonstrates just the fun relationship that Lori and Adam had. They were on opposing teams. It was largely boys against girls, though I think that Colby was also on our team, and maybe one other boy. But anyway, it was mostly boys against girls. And they just had a really fun relationship. And I already mentioned, my son. I mean, you can see he wanted to dress like Adam. I mean, it was very, very cute. After this trip, he started wearing his baseball hats backwards like Adam. So it was a very fun trip. However, one of the things that really hit me was the timing of it. Realizing that this trip started on July 20th. And I did remember getting in the evening, and we swam with the kids till like 3 o'clock in the morning. Like the date stamp on the picture was like 3 o'clock in the morning because Mother of the Year here. But the one thing to keep in mind is that Lori and Charles were footing the bill. I was a fairly new single mom. There's no way I could have afforded this vacation. And they were very generous. They just would pick up the tab from my memory, for not just my family's like meals and stuff, but also Adam and his wife and their son. Although his wife Nicole wasn't really around that much. She's not in any of the pictures except maybe one. I'm not sure if that's her. But anyway, but Adam was around for the entire vacation. So where am I going with this? Oh, then this was a picture of Tylee with one of my daughters who gave me permission to share this with her face not blurred. And in the same way that my son was stuck to Adam's side, Tylee was stuck to this particular daughter's side. There were no girls my daughter's age, and so she just really took Tylee under her wing. And there are a lot of pictures of them together, and Tylee is just the absolute cutest here. Okay, so where am I going? It occurred to me when I saw that date stamp that the vacation would have started on July 20th. It was about like 5 days to a week. So maybe, but all of us leaving maybe the 25th, 26th, something like that. And then here we go, August 1st. There are these notes from, this was from a therapist who had been interviewing Lori, Tylee, Colby about all of these concerns and these allegations that Joe had sexually abused Colby and Tylee. It is important to note that Tylee never made an outcry. I have dug through these records, and if anyone sees anything where Tylee has made an outcry, please let me know. From everything that I read, she never actually made an outcry. And at the age of 3, someone even asked her if anyone was pressuring her to say these things, and she named 2 people who were pressuring her. So, she just had this iron will from a very, very young age. So here in this record, and keep in mind, this is the following week after this vacation that was spare no expense. As well, Mrs. Fallow is a devout Mormon who has mentioned to me that death would be an option before giving Tylee to her father, Mr. Joseph Ryan, even for a visit. These are real and serious concerns. So, and the Travis County District Court did order the reinstatement of supervised visits between the father and the child. This was actually before this date. The court also ordered a psychological evaluation for Mrs. Fallow, primarily in response to these stated concerns. And I make the note here, this is a stunningly key insight into Lori's mentality. I've talked about this in other lives before I stuck to a private Facebook group, but then also in that group that Lori tells on herself. She is so arrogant and she has the impulse control of a toddler. She can't keep secrets. And you see this again and again. I think part of the reason for this is she collects trophies in true serial killer, mindset or MO. But she also, when she feels like she's gotten away with something, she can't help herself. But in this case, she hasn't even gotten away with anything. At this point, it's August 1st, but it's only days before Joe is actually assaulted by Alex. In fact, it's only 4 days later. So he was assaulted by Alex on August 5th. 4 days after Lori told on herself. I mean, here she is basically, this is a secret she should be keeping, but she doesn't have the impulse control to keep things a secret. And that's why you see again and again and again in the FOIA docs, she is telling people what has happened. She goes to Hawaii after Joe is found dead. She's talking to her friends in Hawaii about how she allegedly, they reported that at least some of them did. Others have amnesia and say they don't recall this conversation. I don't know how you would not recall someone saying they paid their brother to murder their ex-husband, especially days after he was found dead. But here you have Lori 4 days later, and we know from the FOIA docs, some of the earliest FOIA docs that were released around this case, thanks to the women at, oh my gosh, I forget, WTAF. I can't off the top of my head. If someone remembers I can picture their Twitter handle, but they are the ones who ordered the first round of FOIA docs around Joe and Lori's divorce. I will forever be indebted to those women. And I had absolutely nothing to do with it. I had 20 minutes notice before it went live in a Facebook group. But I am very, very grateful because it did really shine a light on, some of these allegations and, what have you. But here it's 4 days later. No one knew where they were doing the exchange. This was a supervised visit that Joe had had. He had not seen Tylee for about a year while he was being investigated. And at one point in one of the documents, he was actually in the same building just, I think, moments either before or after Tylee was there for an interview, and he says something about that. It's really heartrending stuff. But okay, so here Lori, we believe she has Alex assault Joe just 4 days later. Okay. Point number 2. Adam has this MO of claiming to be this outcast who was kind of cast aside by his family. And we find out about that in an email from Cole Vallow, who is Charles' oldest son. He's writing to Detective Nathan Moffat from Chandler Police. And I won't go into the whole thing, but he writes, Adam Cox has been trying to contact Kay Woodcock and telling her that the Cox family has disowned him for a year. So we don't know how exact, Cole is being here. Was it actually a year? Was it as things were heating up between Lori and Charles? Because this was very much a family affair. That's what the FOIA docs tell us. And he said, well, on social media, there are all still in contact frequently. So that was a lie and strange. And I agree with Cole on this, that this was, if Kay's statement to Cole and the family is to be believed, and we have no reason not to, she had told them that Adam for some time had been trying to contact her and telling her that he had been disowned by the family, while at the same time on social media, according to Cole, there were pictures this entire time. So that does beg the question, if true, why would Adam do this? Was he trying to sidle up to Kay? Was he trying to kind of like penetrate enemy camp and get information? We don't know. It's very odd, especially given the timing. It sounds like if this really had been going on for a year would have been, this was sent in July, soon after Charles was killed. And so there wouldn't have, at that point, Lori and Chad hadn't even met yet. Okay, so here's what he had said on this last episode of 2020.
Lori's mindset was off. It was definitely off. My family cut me off. Like probably the most alone I've ever felt in my life. You're still in that moment. You still feel that. That feeling will never leave me. When you have family that you used to have a great life with. And you think that they loved you and, respected you, to have them cut you off. It's tough.
I can't underscore enough. I am not sharing this to mock Adam in any way. There are so many legitimate victims in this whole story. I heard about someone who was very tangentially involved, who, when this story broke, someone said that this person had gone into therapy, and this person played a very, very minimal role, but was so impacted by having just crossed paths with these psychopaths, in the midst of their relationship when they were a couple. So obviously, all of these family members have suffered. Their worlds have been turned upside down. And I don't want to in any way minimize that. However, I just don't see evidence of him actually being ostracized from his family. And I'm going to dive into this a little bit more. So this was an email that Kay had sent to Detective Moffat. She sent quite a few emails back and forth with Detective Moffat. She was in very close contact while Charles' case was being investigated, and I somewhat use that term loosely, but that's for another live. But this was on July 20th. And one thing to note here, and I'll go into more detail in the overview video, but one of the things that I've been doing is as I go through these FOIA docs, I match the font and I try to unredact the documents. I don't want to be irresponsible. To some degree, you need to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. However, I am going to do a video on the affidavit of probable cause that was released by Chandler Police in the shooting death of Charles Fallow, because that was a very heavily redacted document. But I found almost every redaction when the rest of the FOIA docs were released. So for whatever reason, the FOIA docs, when they were released, weren't nearly as redacted. And so that I'm going to dedicate a live just to walking through that document, because it tells a pretty astounding story. But excuse me. Having said that, obviously there have been times I have been wrong. I do keep a list of all of the names that, as I come across them in this story, I do keep a list in a Google Doc of all of the names in like descending order by the width of the characters of their name, so that if I drop in a name and it's just a little too long or a little too short, then I'll grab the next name. Sometimes they refer to something like, like potentially Lori's brother, Adam and Nicole. But we do know from other details in this that this is, well, I do feel confident that she is talking about Adam and Nicole. And I think you'll come to the same conclusion when I share some of the other documents. Just 1 second. I'm sorry. It's not COVID. Okay, so I believe she wrote, I talked with Lori's brother, Adam, and Nicole. You can see she likes to use ampersand instead of writing out and they are very anxious to talk to you. She said they left a voicemail for you, and I think she's talking about Nicole, and have waited all week for a return call. She said she's calling you again today. Now, if this is talking about Adam and Nicole, this was not true. And Detective Moffat actually addresses this. At least I can say, according to Detective Moffat, this is not true. And he addressed a concern that Adam had been telling Kay that he was trying to get a hold of Detective Moffat. They have lots of family insight, also saying that Alex is currently in Colombia and he took off work the entire week. Again, this is another statement that leads me to believe that she is talking about Adam and Nicole. Please call them ASAP. Do you know the person Al assaulted and spent time for was Lori's ex-husband, Joe Ryan? Thanks for all your help, Kay Woodcock. So, one thing to note here is how would, if this is truly about Adam, how would he know that Alex had traveled to Colombia? Like, and there are indicators during this time that this is right around, I mean, this is only a little more than a week after Charles was murdered. And there are indicators that there was a breakdown in the family. And yet, Adam, I believe Adam, was aware that that Alex had taken off for Colombia. And we do know from the FOIA docs that Alex was in Colombia during that week. Another thing that was very unusual is, and this was back in 2020, when Adam was saying that he had been cut off from the family, uh, Barry and Janice Cox, Lori, Adam, and Alex's parents, they had up and moved very suddenly to St. George, Utah. There were accounts, or I should say, allegedly, there were accounts that from neighbors that they just like left one night and they never saw them again. So, I don't know how reliable that is. There aren't references to that in the FOIA docs, but we do know that they moved to St. George, Utah, and we also know that during this time that Adam had claimed to have been ostracized by the family or disowned. He posted pictures on his Facebook where he had gone and visited his parents in St. George. And he actually referenced or tagged himself in St. George, according to my memory. Excuse me. So that was that was like, a little eyebrow raising. But then Adam actually moved to St. George. So at the time that he was saying that his family cut him off, it looks like this was recorded maybe in November or December of 2021. By this, I mean this latest episode of 2020, Adam and Evil. Excuse me. So, so at the time that he was saying that his whole family had disowned him, he was actually living in a stone's throw from his parents. So, I mean, this town, I looked it up at one point, I think it's something like around 86,000. This is not a big town, so this is another kind of detail that causes me some pause in some of Adam's claims. So I am not questioning that. I'm sure there is chaos in the Cox family. And there were indicators in the podcast that he did with his son, Zach, that there could be tension between him and Zach. I don't know that firsthand. However, that wouldn't be because he defended Charles. That would have been for a different reason. We don't know, and I'm certainly not going to, surmise anything because it's not in the FOIA docs. But there is no indicator from these documents that he was actually cut off from the family. To drill this point a little bit more, there were warnings not to trust Adam, and this will ultimately circle back to his family some more. So, yeah. All right. So Kay contacted Detective Moffat. This was July 25th. And she said, I hope Adam contacted you and hope it was helpful to you. Cole and Zach's mom, Cheryl, warned me to be very careful with what we tell him or his wife, Nicole. Cheryl had an issue with Adam when Charles and Lori's were going through court battles with Lori's ex. That was Joe, my brother, and Cheryl, who was Charles' ex. And it was explosive in both of those divorces and custody battles. We're not going to dive into that. So there was this interview, and I'm building up to something. Having been trained as an analyst and a reporter, I'm putting out the facts, and then I'm trying to, as responsibly as possible, kind of build conclusions around them. But there was an interview done between Bobby Vallow and Detective Moffat from Chandler Police that took place on August 3rd. This timing is key, so kind of tuck that away.
I think they studied on this real hard, and I think that they decided that this is how they're going to do it, and I think they did it. That's how I see it.
I don't disagree with you. I really don't. And we're a long way from giving up on this case. So, like I said, we're actively working it and sifting through phone records and text messages and your brother's phone. And, he had told Adam, and I've been trying to get a hold of Kay because I know Kay was talking to Adam, Lori's other brother.
Right.
I don't know if you talked to Adam or not, but I can tell
I've never talked to Adam in my life that I know.
Well, just from text messages I've seen of his, or at least between Lori and Al, I don't know that Adam's very trustworthy. That's one of the reasons I called Kay 3 times last night. Is I want her to just be very guarded with what she tells him. So, because
Adam, I was curious immediately.
Adam and your brother were talking that morning and the day before about Lori and kind of how she's fallen off the deep end in this religion and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And they were talking up to that day, but I think Adam might have called Lori afterwards. So I don't know. Well, and Adam told Kay, yeah, I've been trying to reach out to the detective. Well, I have not received a phone call, an email, message to call him or anything. So I just don't know that he's very trustworthy or where he lies in this. And I doubt his motive in helping. So
I'm going to tell her as soon as we hang up, tell her don't you damn say anything to him.
Yeah, in fact, I'm going to call her on her cell phone, the 1037 number. I'm going to call her as soon as we hang up.
Okay, so it's kind of hard to hear Detective Moffat's voice in that. If you couldn't hear it clearly, I am going to talk about it, but then also at the end of the presentation, I'm going to share a link to the actual presentation where you will be able to listen to all of these video snippets in the privacy of your own living room. But basically, what Detective Moffat is saying here, this is a detective of a pretty serious murder investigation. I don't think he was taking it as seriously as he should. We will delve into that in another live. Excuse me. But here he is calling Kay 3 times the day before, August 2nd, to warn her that he doesn't think that Adam is reliable. He also references that there were, and he's a little bit vague. You can tell he's exercising some caution, while at the same time referencing there's some evidence that that Adam may have called Lori after talking to Charles in one of those conversations that most likely would have been the day before Charles was murdered. And and then some of Adam's claims, and this claim that we see both Adam, we know that Adam has made, as well as Nicole, that they've been trying to get a hold of Detective Moffat, and they're hoping that he'll call them back. And here's Detective Moffat saying, it's August 3rd. It's almost a month after Charles had been murdered, and Adam had gone dark. No, Nicole had gone dark. Like I don't mean dark like weirdo Chad Dayball. I mean non-responsive. You don't see them reaching out. And this point here was one of the earliest points that made me very suspicious of Adam, because this just isn't the behavior of someone who makes some of the claims that Adam made both before this interview with 2020, but then also after the interview. Okay, next. Okay, this was an email from Kay. Oh gosh. This, I think, I meant to grab the date. If someone can remind me, I will follow up with the date of this exchange. It was a very long email, and I meant to go back and grab the date and add it in, and apparently I did not. I think it was, yeah, I'm not going to guess. But it was sometime July, August. Actually, oh no, this was August, after Bobby had talked to Detective Moffat, because she references that, what I believe is a reference to that. She's talking about Lori. She is pissed. I'm not going to go into that. She's talking about how she's afraid that Lori's cult friends are trying to intimidate her on LinkedIn. Anyway, she said, I wish she would call and ask for money if she gives us JJ. I know that's on her mind. It would be stupid on her part. So Kay was emailing Detective Moffat and just like giving him tips and, just kind of sharing her thoughts. But then she said, you, and then I believe in parentheses, or Bobby, said not to trust Nicole and Adam, which we don't. I share only superficial thoughts and mostly listen to her, speaking of Nicole, most likely, about how dysfunctional, most likely, Adam's family is. My thought, if they're using me to siphon info, why couldn't I share something not true with them and kind of set up Lori? Just a thought. No worries. I would never do anything without consulting you first. So you can see from this email to Detective Moffat, she got the message from Bobby that, and Bobby's very, very sincere in that entire interview. But she got the message from Bobby not to trust Nicole and Adam, and she basically lets him know, hey, don't worry about me. I'm just basically in this relationship to get information. And she even kind of passed on the idea of possibly giving them false information. We don't know how he replied. I think the main thing that Adam and Nicole were aligned with Kay on were, one, cracking Tylee. They all talk about this, but then also finding Lori. They were trying to find out where Lori was living, and they did that in sometime in September. We don't know exactly when. I think an email sent on September 26th was most likely when they found out where she was living. And Kay also talked about that in the last 2020 episode, where she said they had their address, they just didn't have the apartment number. So they were working together to try to get information about that. But here, Okay, again, is emailing Detective Moffat. She said, I spoke with Nicole. I believe this is Adam. Adam said, you can crack Tylee, but you think she's a minor. Well, she was. I mean, she was 16. Lori told me Tylee was emancipated in order to make financial obligations with the money left to her via most likely Joe's life insurance, naming her sole beneficiary. That is actually not true. Not only was Tylee not the sole beneficiary, she wasn't even listed as a beneficiary at all. And I do know that from being listed as a beneficiary, which I actually found that out from someone investigating the case, someone who was very kind and let me know that Joe had included me for a small percentage, but it was very, very touching that he had included me as a beneficiary. And one of the many people I talked to, well, it wasn't many, but trying to mix it up. One of the people I talked to about the insurance policy slipped and I said something that indicated they didn't actually say that Lori was the primary beneficiary, but mentioned something about that it wasn't impacted by divorce. So I was able to read between the lines. And also, Adam also shared in the interview that he did with Detective Moffat that Tylee only got $2,000 of the $50,000 that had been left. And it was actually a little more than 50,000, about 10,000, maybe more, that would have been left to Lori. Anyway, so that's not true, and it wasn't true that Tylee was emancipated because Lori wouldn't have been charged with abandonment if she had been emancipated. Because the whole point of emancipation is you basically become an adult as a teenager. I have Tylee's social security number if you need it. I believe cracking Tylee would be easily accomplished. In Tylee's mind, she would have to deal with Lori's and the family backlash, which would make her life unbearable. No, it would not make her life unbearable. It would have made her life over sooner. I'll get into this more in another live, but that would be her hesitation, which I'm sure you can circumvent. And then she talks about something that's redacted, Tylee accused, and then something that's redacted, which Tylee admitted within recent past. If this has to do with the allegations against Joe, like I said, this is not true. From all of the records that I've seen, Tylee did not accuse Joe of sexually abusing her. Colby did. So which Tylee admitted within recent past to Lori and Charles that it wasn't true. We don't know that this is in reference to the allegations against Joe, but it is redacted. And then something redacted in order to make Lori happy. We don't know what that is. But my point being here that she was getting the message from Adam, who was telling Nicole. He also talks to Detective Moffat and says the same thing in his interview with Detective Moffat, that they could crack Tylee. So they were all aligned on this idea of cracking Tylee because they suspected that she had more information, which I fully agree with. And I don't believe that Tylee was honest in the interview. However, we will talk more about that in another live. But that said, Tylee had one job, which was to stay alive. And we know that Lori left with Tylee. And there was no consequence for that. It's also apparent from the video of both Lori being interviewed as well as Tylee that in the interview with Lori, while Lori was being interviewed, you see Tylee in the room alone and you can hear Lori's voice. And when Tylee was being interviewed, Lori was sitting in this weird Indian, like she was meditating, but I believe that she was straining to hear what Tylee said. And I believe that two things most likely happened on that run, in addition to them stopping at a CVS and getting flip flops that actually did not fit Lori, which we'll talk about that in another live. But they dropped JJ off. But I believe that most likely Lori may have also hid a silencer. Again, we'll talk about that in another live. We're going to have a lot of lives. But I believe that Lori would have also put the fear of God in Tylee, because if you look at the interview that they did in January in the Gilbert Police Department, Tylee was sassy. She called out both Lori and Melanie Gibb on 3 different occasions. She talked about Lori being put in a rubber room, and I believe most likely that Lori let Tylee know there would be none of that. Like too much rode on Tylee's testimony, and you see tension between them, even in where Tylee stands when they're being interviewed by the car, the body language between both of them. Again, we'll talk about that in another live. Okay. All right. So they were aligned on these 2 tasks, and they were successful in tracking down Lori. So to that end, the relationship was successful. Okay, so this family is what I call a wannabe Mormon mafia, and we're going to just talk a little bit about some of the dynamics in this family. So it says here, in both of Lori's accounts, she had regular communication with her sister Summer, who was listed in her phone as Sum. The number linked to Summer was, and that's redacted. Summer also shared Lori's religious beliefs. Tuck that away. The Summer later claimed in a video, an interview she did, that she did not share her beliefs. But I will show in this live just how much she did. On October 7th, 2019, at 1:04 p.m., Summer sent Lori a message asking if she already knew about the Tesla incident. Lori responded at 15:51 hours, indicating that she did not know. Summer asked if she could call or text. Lori asked Summer to text her. Now, this was key. Lori is leading Summer into a trap, I believe. And Lori is not the brightest bulb in the drawer here. You see that again and again. I mean, she really makes some ridiculous mistakes, thankfully. But Summer just walked right into this. And you even see a note in one of the FOIA docs where they note that Lori had a tendency, especially as time went on. So by October, she had become a lot more savvy, and the document says that she would tell people, call me. So they would text her. Her niece, Melanie, was particularly bad about putting too much in text, and it did cause her trust ratings to plummet. But here, it's October. She was already pretty savvy by this point, but she's like, no, we don't need to talk. How about you just text me? So the following is the text string as it appears. Summer, an incident that supposedly happened to Brandon sounds highly suspicious. Now, this is what? I think he was shot at October 2nd, I believe. I mean, this was within the week, but it wasn't even right afterwards. So Lori playing dumb. Brandon's Tesla or the Tesla company? Summer, Brandon's. I mean, how in the world does she not see the red flags here? But anyway, Brandon's. He claims someone shot at him and shot the window to his Tesla a few days ago. Police are looking into it. Summer texts again. I think he is either trying to set Al up or make a future hit on Mel, make him look innocent, knowing him. But who knows, knowing him, sounds suspicious to me. She really doubles down on this sounding really suspicious to her. Lori, she sets this trap. She's like, maybe it was Edgar. Now, from all accounts, allegedly, Edgar is Summer's side piece. She posted a picture with him on Facebook. I'm trying to keep this above board as much as possible, trying not to make it too salacious, but she did post a picture with him and they look very cozy, but she's still married. But anyway, so and he looks like he's like, you know, in training for his Eagle Scout. I mean, the guy looks like a kid. But anyway, maybe it was Edgar. Where is he? Question mark, question mark. Summer. A series of emojis. We don't know what they were. They didn't get translated into the software. I doubt it was him. He wouldn't miss or leave witnesses. Like Edgar is just so thug. He usually makes things look like natural causes, but IDK where he is or what he is doing. I mean, Summer walked right into this. Is unreal. You know, Lori was like, perfect, plausible deniability. Thank you, my dumb sister. Summer, he has a message to me on his mule page, but I haven't responded. Anyway, whatever. Don't care about the rest. So Lori now has some text evidence in the event anyone ever goes after her that maybe this will be like the perfect crime, because here is her Summer saying, yeah, my side piece, he wouldn't miss or leave witnesses. He usually makes things look like natural causes. Okay. Rewinding the clock a little bit, going back to January 31st. So this was right after like all hell broke loose between Lori and Charles. Lori had moved all this money out of the business account. I mean, just drained him. We will talk more about that in another live. I mean, she went back and like the last couple withdrawals were just so cruel. It was like she saw that there's still like $250 left. So I think she like made a payment to their credit card and then made a final withdrawal. So I mean, she just wiped the business account out. There were allegations that she had threatened to kill Charles. Again, we will go into significant detail because these events that transpired between January 30th and February 1st are key. They really set the stage for the crimes that that follow through the rest of the year. But Summer, Lori's sister, texted Lori and stated he talked to Jeff. Jeff is Summer's husband. And Mimi. Mimi is Janice Cox, their mother, this morning, and told them that you left him and that he called the police. And if they track you down, they are taking you in for a psych eval. Now, this is at 8:55 in the morning. So this is before Lori goes into Gilbert Police Department with Melanie Gibb and Tylee. That happened somewhere around noon. And Lori acts very surprised in that interview, but we know now she already had a heads up. He told Mimi that he had someone from the Bishopburg, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, or stake presidency, listening in on a conversation you had with him where you told him you would kill him and that you were married to Moroni, and that whoever was listening, and we know that this was Gabe Bonilla, the bishop for the area, and they had just moved to Gilbert on January 1st. So I think that this move was strategic. And we know that they had moved January 1st because Charles mentions that in the body cam video when he was being interviewed by police. And their bishop, Gabe Bonilla, which we will definitely jump into him, he was one of the people who could have, in my opinion, prevented all of the deaths, except for Joe, if indeed Joe was murdered. But Charles had pointed out, like he actually pointed in the direction of Gabe's house. Gabe came to Charles' house as he was being interviewed, and he did Charles absolutely zero favors. He was condescending. He was contradicting Charles. So, police are already going to be a little suspicious, more than a little suspicious, when a man is claiming domestic violence. But here you have a friend and someone who Charles had actually looped into a conversation. I don't want to get too much off track here. And this friend is basically like, no, you know what? There was no terroristic threat, and he was using all his biggest SAT words and stuff, and it was absolutely ridiculous. But anyway, so but this points to the fact that he may have played a role in something that we will address in a minute. I don't want to give it away. Okay, so that you are married to Moroni, and that whoever was listening was going to have your recommend, this is her temple recommend, suspended until they talk to you. I just want you to know what we are hearing on our end. I want you to know, that I 100% support you. I am here if there is anything I can do for you to help. The fact he would try to get your recommend suspended shows extreme evil and malicious intent. I know you have help from the other side. Oh, there it is. Here we go. First reference to the other side. I know you are being inspired to know what to do, and you are prepared to do your mission. I support you. I love you. I am here for you. I am so sorry you have to go through all of this crap. Now, in my opinion, I don't think that this is a case of woulda, coulda, shoulda. I think this goes beyond the pale of support that your typical sibling would show another sibling. That said, there were threats in both directions, and there are some claims that Lori had made that are supported in the FOIA docs. It will take the wisdom of Solomon to address some of these issues, because it is never my intent to in any way shame victims. But like I said, I'm trying to walk that line as carefully as possible of telling the truth and sharing the facts. And I did a video about Joe where I talked about this issue of people wanting perfect victims. So I'm not going to get back up on my soapbox, but I have seen this pattern in the true crime community, not as much anymore because it's just not something that is expressed in the group that I am in, the only group that I'm in right now. But early on, you saw people really making these victims kind of run the gauntlet. And if they got to the other side unscathed, they would extend the scepter of their support, their kindness, their compassion. And I just don't think that that's realistic or fair. Okay. Moving on. This is from the affidavit of probable cause from Chandler. Lori found out about the potential intervention on July 9th, 2019. She reached out to Alex Cox, Melanie Boudreau, and Summer Shiflett to warn them of the elaborate plan that Adam and Charles had. Now, there are question marks how Lori found out about this. I will posit a theory. But there are a lot of questions we just won't have answers to until these trials. And the trial for Charles isn't even going to happen until Lori and Chad are tried in Rexburg or in Idaho. So this could be quite a while before we get some of these answers. Oh, one thing I will say by reminder, these are not early on. I had unredacted this document, but then, like I said, I actually found these references when the FOIA docs were released. So these, I have a very high level of confidence because and that's how I was able to unredact entire sentences. They came from the FOIA doc. And I dropped them in, just that's just for the sake of transparency, so that you don't have to take my word for it. Okay. Adam and his son Zach were picked up at the airport, and that's actually, I don't believe that that's true. Zach was already living in Phoenix. He had been living with Lori and Lori and Charles. And after everything went down there in January, he moved in with Melanie and Brandon. So he kind of jumped out of the frying pan into the fire on that one. But so they were only picking up Adam, not Zach. But minor point. Adam and his son Zach were picked up at the airport on July 10th by Adam's mother. Summer provided Lori with updates regarding Adam's whereabouts, and they didn't include the apostrophe. Whereabouts, and asked Lori if she wanted to run interference. Lori told Summer that she was trying to figure it out. Summer commented, "I will kill him myself if that is the case." Lori responded, "No, I need you safe." I mean, this is like something out of a soap opera. There is no indication who Summer was talking about killing. So, to be fair, we don't know who Summer was talking about killing. However, this text exchange did occur the day before Charles was killed. So, I'll just leave that with you. But another thing I want to touch on here is that the way she says this, "I will kill him myself." If you think about you having made a statement like that, "I will do X, Y, Z myself." The assumption here is that generally the other person or someone else was planning to do something. And it's generally used in kind of a hyperbolic way, like, like, "You won't have to do it. I'll do it myself," And so did she really plan to kill uh, Charles or whomever this was herself? No, this is her, I believe, trying to prove that she was worthy of Lori's trust. And I think this was an excited declaration. And we don't know what had been said to elicit this very, very strong response. However, when I found this in the FOIA doc, and I found these by, but oh, gosh. I found these by just searching the text around the redactions. But something elicited this very strong response, and this really put major question marks around Summer and her involvement. And true to Cox fashion, right before Charles was killed, she takes off for New York. Everyone kind of scatters, and we'll talk more about that in this actual live. But yeah, okay. So backing up to the day before, and I'm talking about at this point, I'm really focusing on the mindset of this family and some of their more thug-like mafia mentality, where you see the sharks are circling. There's and in this case, Charles is the one who I believe was being circled. So this was the day before, so 2 days before Charles was killed. And this came from Lori's iCloud. Lori for Style was one of her iCloud accounts, and it was the only one that fits in here. And this was her main iCloud account. Lori received a text from, this was Melanie Gibb. And we know that because of this reference to Phoebe. I don't know why I didn't unredact this. The name associated with this number, according to Lori's contact list, was Phoebe. We know from these FOIA docs that Melanie also had a burner phone, at least one, and Lori or someone assigned these different players different names, and it was based on a name from a previous probation. In this previous probation, where Melanie Gibb was Phoebe, she was Lori, and I believe also Chad's daughter, definitely Lori's daughter. Lori and Chad were married in multiple probations, supposedly. And then one probation to really up the creep factor, uh, Chad was Lori's father. So I can't even go there. All right. This same number on the Lori for Style account was listed for Melanie Gibb. The text read, I believe it was Melanie Gibb, and she's the only Melanie with an IE. Melanie Pulowski, who is referred to as Melanie Boudreau in most of these documents, she doesn't have an E on the end. Every once in a while, they do misspell her name, but obviously, when they redact her last name, it's much longer than Melanie Gibbs. The text read, "Are you home? This is Melanie Gibb. I want to come over." I will definitely address Melanie's role in all of this. But the one thing I will say is here it's 2 days before Charles is going to be murdered. We don't know how much Melanie Gibb knows, but she wants a front row seat. She actually Lori blows her off. I'll talk more about this in another live, but I will say this. Lori totally blew her off. She wasn't even replying to her text. She's like talking to Alex, talking to Chad, texting Melanie, her niece, telling her she can't go to this wedding. I mean, she's juggling all of these places, and she's not replying to Melanie Gibb. But then Melanie Gibb texts her and is like, "I'm here." Like she drove over and was like, "I'm outside the house." And so you can see Lori's like, "Okay, you can come back, but basically you need to be quiet because I have these conversations and I'm juggling." And anyway, so Lori responded stating this is to Melanie, "All my family and the kids are here, so it's chaos right now." So we don't know who all of her family is, and we don't know who the kids are that she's referencing. I actually suspect that Melanie, her niece, either wasn't over at her house for this event or had already left, because shortly after this, Lori texted her niece to tell her she can't go to the wedding, that she needed to stay in Phoenix. And you see Melanie, her niece, acquiesce to that under duress. So, so there are question marks. Who was there while all of this was going on? We don't know when Summer and her kids left for New York. I think their whole family left for New York. I don't know that for sure. We only know for sure. I think that I think the only one we know for sure about is Summer left for New York. But so there are question marks. What was Colby there? Was his wife Kelsey and their daughter there? We just don't know, but she says all my family and the kids are here, so it's chaos. So you see, like, the family is gathering. We don't know who was there exactly, but we know that from what Lori says, that family was there. So Gibb responded, "Okay, let me know when," and I will address in another live how law enforcement repeatedly coddles Melanie Gibb to the point of actually referring to her by her last name. Now, she's the only one they do this with. Everyone else, they treat the redactions like this. So it'll be the first name, and they'll redact the last name, or they'll redact the whole name. But they never just refer, to my memory, they never refer to anyone by their last name, but they do repeatedly with Melanie. And I think that is by design, because when I was going through these documents and I went through them page by page, and I will show a screenshot of one document where they repeatedly refer to Melanie as by her last name. And I personally believe that this was by design to make it more difficult for anyone searching the document to find references to Melanie Gibb and her involvement. Okay. All right. All right. So, it flattery is not enough to overcome Summer's involvement. Why do I have a picture of potato salad? Am I being petty? Maybe a little, but there had been a live that Lauren had done with Lori Hellis where Summer showed up for this live, and she was just like commenting. I forget the date. Someone can drop it in here. I think it was sometime. It might have been shortly after the kids were found. I'm not exactly sure. But Summer had left this comment. I had never met Kay. The only thing I knew about Kay was that she was JJ's grandma and made the best potato salad ever. And I am not trying to shame people who were very touched by this. That's great that they were touched. Because Kay kind of extended the scepter, not the scepter, an olive branch to Summer in this exchange. I felt like, am I being really petty here? Because and granted, I am an analyst. I am not particularly sentimental, but at the same time, I've been digging into these documents, and this was even before some of these FOIA docs were released. But even with what we knew at that time, I was just like, okay, you know what? Maybe we could just hold up here a little before we put the I don't know. But anyway, so at that particular time, here were some facts around Summer and not her involvement, but some of the things that she did tangential to this to these crimes. She created this YouTube video. Now, this was supposed to be for her family. Apparently, someone from the family passed this on to a YouTuber or to a private Facebook group. I'm not exactly sure how this was made public. I know I was in a Facebook group that has since been shut down when this came out, but we were all able to access this video. It was in the group, and then someone also published it publicly. I wasn't a fan of this being made public, but I'm not going to get on a soapbox about that. However, I did go through the video, and one of the things that I noticed is that there were no pictures of Tylee and JJ. She would have made this video sometime December, January. We don't know exactly when the memorial was for Alex. We do know that Janice said it was a very small number of people because only those who didn't believe he was a murderer were invited. And but you go through this entire video, and there are pictures of, as far as I can see, all of the cousins. Summer's kids, Colby, Zach Cox, and like all of these kids, and not one single picture of Tylee or JJ. Which I mean, this was released. I don't remember when this was released. Sometime in, I think, early on in 2020. It was definitely before the kids' remains were found, so before June. But I was just like, okay, you know what? This isn't something someone does who's creating a tribute for her brother, who genuinely believes that the kids are alive. It was clear, at least to me, it's my opinion, that she would have done this to avoid upsetting someone, either herself or someone in the family. But somewhere along the line, a decision was made that Tylee and JJ were not to be included in this tribute, which I found incredibly suspicious. Then also, this was in June, so very soon after the kids' remains were found, she had a post where she made this kind of tribute to Tylee and JJ. And again, I'm not trying to be unfair, but this was one of the pictures that was included in that post. Honestly, I can't believe that anyone would like this picture because of Barry's hand. I mean, this is just, in my opinion, this picture shouldn't have ever been taken. But the minute someone looked at this picture, and I have a document that had been passed on to me. It's not publicly circulated, so I can't make it public. But there are allegations in this document. I can't support any of them. They are allegations, but they do involve Barry. Again, I am not in any way trying to malign him. I am just saying it is a thread throughout this document. And so just looking at this picture now, could I be at least to some degree influenced by my own past with sexual abuse? Possibly. But in my opinion, this is a young girl. You can tell from Tylee's body language, she is very uncomfortable. And the placement of Barry's hand is highly inappropriate. Now, obviously, Summer would have had lots of pictures to share. When I came across this, I was just like, why? Why would you make this one of the pictures so soon after the kids' remains were found? And I can't even offer an explanation. All I can say is I think it speaks to this family's mindset. Okay, another picture she included. Now there were very, very sweet pictures also included in this post. However, when I came across this picture, I felt like at the absolute minimum, it was tone deaf, because we had just found out that there was this ominous text that Chad had sent his wife at the time, Tammy, that he saw a large raccoon and he shot it. I mean, emotions were just at their peak. There were questions about where did Tylee actually die? Was she shot by Chad? Was she killed before she was brought to the property? And so I just felt, and this may not have been her intention at all, but at the time, and I still feel this way, that it just kind of came across like she was just floating the possibility. Hey, just letting you all know, Tylee also knows how to use a gun, because here we are at a gun range. All right. And it's not just Summer. You see, and again, I will go into more detail, but Tylee, here's Adam saying he was ostracized, but it's actually Tylee. There's evidence that Tylee was ostracized by this family, because you see in the pictures from Colby's wedding, not only is Tylee not in the wedding, although this is Zach Cox, this is Cole Vallow, and this is Zach Vallow. So his cousin, his stepbrothers were in, they were among the wedding party, and JJ was the ring bearer. And this was actually another kind of piece of the puzzle here. And if you're not familiar with me, all I can say is I do not just make up details. I visited Lori shortly after Joe's death. She had asked me to come out to be a support to Tylee. I'm not going to go into all of that. I've addressed that in multiple videos, and it's also out there. Some of these shows, but she had asked me to come out, and there were 2 times. So for the most part, I was very surprised by how much Tylee kind of hung out with us, and it was touching because here she is, this fun. I could tell she was depressed, but she's this cool teenager, and here she is hanging out with her mom and this aunt who she didn't really know very well, but we kind of bonded over like silly memes and ridiculous YouTube videos. And so Lori kind of chided us for like speaking like a twin language almost, because we were referencing these ridiculous videos and memes, and Lori had no idea what we were talking about. But Tylee hung out with us quite a bit. There are only 2 times that I remember her walking out where it was, at least it appeared to me at the time, to be in direct response to something. The first time was when Barry and Janice came over. I don't have an agenda in saying that. It was just notable. Like, they walked in, Tylee was in the living room, and she went back to her bedroom. So it was just kind of, and she didn't come out the rest of the visit. She said hi, and then she just left. So it was just kind of like, note to self. Because Barry and Janice had always been very kind to my kids. They were eccentric, but they were very kind to me and to my children. The other time was when Lori mentioned Colby's wedding. So she started talking about Colby's wedding, and there was an iMac that was right by the kind of in an enclave in the kitchen. And she asked if I wanted to see pictures from Colby's wedding, and Tylee left. Does it mean anything? Who knows? It was one of those things that I just took note of, like, I really don't like weddings. So I thought, and Tylee and I had quite a few similarities in our personality. I even joked with her that she would be a fantastic analyst. But so Lori pulled up pictures from Colby's wedding, and in one of the pictures, there were all these family members, and they're standing in a line in their front yard. And I asked where Tylee was, and Lori, in her very nonchalant way, said, "Oh, she had to work, but she came later." But the photographer had already left. So it really stood out to me, just because I was like, that is very strange. Like, she was 16 at the time. Was she 16? 15? I think 15. But like, no one's job at that age is so important that you can't take off. Like, that just made absolutely zero sense to me. Like, why would she be at work? So I don't know if she didn't want to be at the wedding, or maybe she picked up that she wasn't wanted at the wedding. I don't know. Different family members have made light of it. Like, one said, "Oh, she was at camp, so no story here." This was very early on in the case, and we were in a group together, and I was just like, okay, one, why would Lori tell me she had to work if she was at camp, unless she was working at a camp? But then, secondly, like, it's not like going to a camp in Phoenix would make any sense. Like, your brother's getting married. I'm sure she could have taken the day off of camp. So, there were just question marks. And again, I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm not trying to rain on Colby's parade here. But even in this front row, and there are other pictures, you see that's Lori, that's Charles. You can see in another picture, he's looking down at JJ. Tylee is nowhere to be seen. And Lori did tell me she came after the photographer left. All right. Then again, in this 2020 episode, so I went through this episode in pretty close detail. I was capturing like videos and stuff like that. But one of the things that I was looking for were pictures of Tylee being included in, kind of like these girl pictures that you tend to see in these shows. And I kind of operated under the assumption that Adam may have gotten some kind of licensing agreement. I don't know that. That is something that these shows sometimes offer. I know that because I was offered one. I'm not trying to do anything. I just gave them the pictures to use exclusively. But so I'm not saying like it wouldn't be a moral choice necessarily to accept money. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying we see some new pictures in this show, but it really jumped out at me that you see her niece Melanie over and over, and I'm sure Adam would have gone through and tried to find pictures of Lori with Tylee, and kind of amidst these Cox women. But there was only one picture that, and I didn't catch it. Someone else in the group I'm in caught it, and it was a picture that it was already in the FOIA docs. So we already had this picture of Lori and Tylee. It's a beautiful, beautiful picture. But this was already in Lori's iCloud account. And I will talk in another live about how I do feel like the FOIA docs point to the fact that I believe that Lori replaced Tylee. She was much more attached to Melanie, her niece, and saw her more as a daughter than she did Tylee. I do know from the first time I ever met Lori, and I have never met Melanie Boudreau, but she talked about Melanie, and she talked about how she was like a second mother to Melanie. So I know that they've always been very close. And she actually refers, Lori, when she's being interviewed the day that Charles was killed, she refers to her grandkids. And that was something that really stymied me from the beginning, because I was like, grandkids. She had one grandchild, and Riley, Colby and Kelsey's daughter, was a newborn at the time, that, or not a newborn, but she was very, very young. And in one of the text messages, Lori refers to going to her grandchild's 1-year-old birthday party, and at that point, Riley was a newborn. And I'll go into more detail about that. But when I saw that text, I was like, okay, file that away. Like, even going through these documents and these shows, it's like playing a game of memory. Like, where have I seen that before? But anyway, so there's evidence. I mean, even in this interview, Lori is, she doesn't show any caution about referring, in my opinion, referring to Melanie as her kid. And there are other references. I mean, everyone who Lori manipulated in this was her child, or she treated them as a mother and a child. But that will definitely be a topic for another live. Okay, Adam and Nicole's scapegoat. So I'll lead with this. I believe that they both used Tylee as a scapegoat, because when you look at the time that this is the first time that Nicole reaches out to Detective Moffat, or that there's any record in the FOIA docs that she reaches out. So we already know from Detective Moffat that he was like, yeah, no, they haven't reached out to me, and actually called out Adam for lying in saying that he had. But here it is, August 8th, almost a month after Charles was murdered. And I'll go into more detail in another live, but Nicole sent this searing email to Detective Moffat. She introduces herself and all of that, but she starts to talk about Tylee. And I'll just read this whole part. Charles was calling us and texting my husband every day, so worried and couldn't believe a mother would leave her child. She's talking about when Lori disappeared, and everyone talks about her being gone for 58 days. In the end, it was much longer than 58 days. It was 70 something, maybe 78 days, something like that. Anyway, again, we'll talk about that in another live. The rest of the family, my mother and father-in-law and sister-in-law, all cut Charles off. So, she's distancing herself. Like the rest of the family, they all cut him off. Very odd. He did nothing wrong. Charles pays for all their cell phones, car insurance. I mean, they use this poor guy. And Adam actually said this was very surprising. I missed this the first time I went through his interview with Detective Moffat, but he actually said that Charles also bought Barry and Janice a car. So there you go. I mean, and I think Kay had said he was paying for something like 22 lines. Anyway, he would tell Adam how Lori had a list of all family members and what spirit level they were, like we were evil spirits, that she talks to God all the time. She knows he isn't Charles anymore and he needed to die. Lori even said that her daughter Tylee is a dark spirit. Now, one thing I want to point out here is that here you have family members. This isn't just a reference to Chad's email, and we'll talk more about this email, but Charles had passed on the email with the ratings, the light and dark ratings of all of Lori's family members in March. So in March 2019, Charles found this email and he forwarded it to Kay. So Kay also had this email, which again we'll talk more about in another live. But she's not just saying like that, hey, there was this email and Chad referred to Tylee as a dark spirit. She's saying that Lori owns this, and she's telling these family members that Tylee is a dark spirit. And we also know from the interviews that Detective Yinklin from Chandler Police did with some of Lori's friends, some who were in this group, some who were a little more tangential, that Lori did refer to Tylee as a dark spirit. That, again, we'll talk more about in another live. But then Nicole adds, that I have to agree with. Again, I will go into more detail, but I will say this. One, it is shocking to me just how none of these family members advocated for Tylee. They all knew that Tylee had been rated a dark spirit. Also, Colby's wife, Kelsey, had been rated a dark spirit. Brandon had been rated a dark spirit. They never reach out to law enforcement and flag this. Like, this is the only reference where I believe anyone talks about Tylee being a dark spirit. And here you have her agreeing with it, making light of it. Okay. She says she would lie, call her mom a bitch at the age 8. So I don't know. It's very strange that she's pulling from Tylee's distant past. We don't even know if this is true. We don't know. Like, did Lori tell her this? Had she not seen Tylee in that long? We just don't know. But it's a weird claim. Like, you're trying, first of all, this is her introduction to Detective Moffat. She has been dark for almost a month, but non-communicative, dark. And then she comes in hot and is throwing all this shade at Tylee. But like referring to something that supposedly Tylee did at the age of 8. She adds, terrible human being, that kid. She hated Charles for no reason, lazy and spoiled. She would do anything to not have to ever work or get up early. Now, the part about getting up early, I witnessed that. This was before. Now, when she was emailing Detective Moffat, Tylee had gotten her GED, so she wasn't in school any longer. When I was there, she was supposedly homeschooling, but she wouldn't get up before noon. Now, who knows how much that was because that they had a guest there, but she was a night owl. She doesn't go to school, nothing. Now, she would have known that she had gotten her GED. Her brother, the same thing. Both just used poor Charles for money all the time. I'm not going to go too far into this, but I will say, and I will take a deep dive into this, not to be cruel. I'm sure if Nicole could retract this email, she would. However, at this point, they all knew because Charles was telling everyone about these ratings, and he was telling everyone that Lori had referred to him as a dark spirit, that Lori had called him by other names. She had called him Ned Schneider. And now we know that he had also been referred to not to his face, but as, two other names, Garrett and Hiplos with a silent H. But here you have someone who had been identified as a dark spirit and not in those ratings. Like Chad must have updated his ratings, and we know from the FOIA docs, which again I'll go into in another live, that his rating, the initial rating was light, but then it was updated when supposedly Ned Schneider, who had been a friend of Charles and had died, this evil spirit had taken over Charles' body. So Charles was no longer Charles. And again, and we'll go into more detail, but you see Lori and her impulse control issues. She actually refers to Charles to his face and tells him, "You're not Charles anymore. You're Ned Schneider." And he's trying to remember, is it Ned Schneider? He thought it was Nick Schneider. And anyway, but she was really off the rails. She had gone off the rails. But here you have someone who had been called a dark spirit and then was shot and killed for being a dark spirit. And even if they didn't think that Tylee was potentially a potential target, certainly by the time Brandon was shot at, because now that would have been the second person who had been identified as a dark spirit. And thankfully the bullet missed him, but he was shot at. But you never see Nicole or Adam step forward. And I have gone through every page of these FOIA docs, with the exception of some of the text messages in the second Chandler doc. So the tail end of that document, I just didn't get, I haven't gotten to yet, but all of the information that was presented in the documents, there is never a reference to Adam or Nicole ever reaching out after, even to advocate for Brandon. Okay. And then you also hear Adam make a reference to Tylee. Now, by way of backfilling the details. So Nicole sends Detective Moffat that email on August 8th. The next day, Detective Moffat calls Adam and they connect for the first time. So this is August 9th, and this is a snippet from that interview.
And I don't know.
This is
I
Adam.
just feel like they're trying to get Charles's, and I don't know, Charles tried to get a divorce from Lori, and she disappeared for 58 days. Nobody knew where she was. Not her family. She didn't tell anybody in her family. She didn't tell anybody. Because she didn't want Charles to actually divorce her. And I think it's because she wanted to keep that policy alive. Yeah. And so that just, all the behavior is so strange that nobody in the family, not even her daughter, knew where she was. you got to her. I don't know what she would say, but gosh, it's just there's something that's really wrong about that.
Okay. Again, you hear, him talking to Detective Moffat about them being able to break Tylee. But more importantly, you hear him refer to Tylee as being, and he didn't understand the idiom, is thick as thieves, but he said, thicker. I think he said thicker than thieves. But, he's making the point here that Tylee is one of them. Like, she is one of the perpetrators. And the family members advocating against Tylee, and I will have a dedicated live to this issue. You see the impact. Now, law enforcement is still responsible for how they treated Tylee. But I'll bury the lead a little bit to say one of the most shocking things, and my next slide will be about the biggest surprises in the FOIA docs. Actually, no, I'm not going to share it. I'm sorry. It's a rabbit hole. I need to exercise impulse control myself. But here you have Adam saying that Tylee is thick as thieves with Lori and Alex, the perpetrators of this murder, but then at the same time making the point that not even Tylee knew where her mom was. So if Tylee is thick as thieves with Lori and Alex, why wouldn't she have been privy to where her mom was? And why would she be left behind at all? She's thick as thieves, so it just made no sense. But unfortunately, you see that law enforcement picks up this mantle, and the entire time, even after all of law enforcement, all of the agencies know that Tylee is also missing, they still treat her as one of the perps. And you see it again and again. They even refer to her as one of the players. They want to know the activity on her cell phone on a particular date. I think it was October 28th, I think. And, and someone updates it with, there was no activity on her cellular phone. And but even after that, there is something that happens. I think it was 2 days before the case went public, and that I won't share. It is, and I'll probably make it like the last detail in the next live, because, and I'm not trying to pull a BuzzFeed here. It was absolutely shocking. It was buried in these FOIA docs, but it was absolutely shocking. But anyway, but I do put some of the onus of responsibility on these family members, whether it was intentional or not. Intentionality is moot here. They did have an impact. Okay. All right. Adam lied about the plan. I believe that Adam lied about the plan, and I'm talking about in this last 2020 episode. Whoops. Okay, I'll play the snippet here.
Charles is texting you. He's telling you all these things that's happening, and you agree to come out to Arizona, right? Charles had called me and he said, "I'm at my end of the rope. I don't know what else to do."
So Charles and Adam formed this allyship. They are communicating constantly over text. They're troubleshooting what seems like an impossible situation, and they're trying to figure out how they can intervene to help Lori.
I was like, "Well, what can I do to help?" He goes, "Well, you're the closest one to her. You're the only one that would probably be able to talk to her." I said, "Okay, well, I'm willing to try." So that was the plan at first.
I will make the case that was not the plan. I do not believe that was the plan. I will present the facts, and you decide for yourself. Not that it really matters what any of us believe. This is all going to come down to what a jury believes. And Adam isn't on trial. Oops. I really don't like Google Slides. Okay, let's rewind the clock a bit. Obviously, product of the 80s here. Okay, going back again to January 31st. So this was when all of the chaos was happening between Lori and Charles, and it was a mess. Charles sent Lori a text message that read, "Your phone is active. I want no trouble. Just let me have my truck and clothes and I'll leave." And there's also a reference from Janice where she actually advocates for Charles. And she was just happy that he had turned her phone back on. But anyway, Charles then added, "And I have no money. We have to pay the rent tomorrow. What should I do? Will you let us use some of the money you took? Otherwise, I'll have to call Peter and tell him we'll be late." Charles then texted, "Please don't go to work today. Your recommend," he's talking about her temple recommend, "has been suspended." So somewhere in all of the communications with the bishop and possibly the stake president, his name is Holmes, because I guess this story just needed a little more intrigue. So the universe introduced a new character with this latest round of, or this, the latest round of FOIA docs, because they left Holmes unredacted once, maybe twice. Anyway, okay, fast forward to June 29th. So this was a couple weeks, almost a couple weeks, week and a half before Charles was murdered. This is Charles to Lori, as you can see. "Sorry if the truth hurts, but what you're doing is apostasy." Apostasy, I think that's the word. "I thought we were going to talk about the divorce. You keep hanging up and it will be tougher on our boy." Lori, define the word apostasy for me. Charles, "If I have to define it for you, then you obviously know what it is. If you hadn't lied to President," and the name is Holmes, "you wouldn't have gotten your temple recommend back. That's apostasy." So somewhere we know that January 31st, it looks like on that day, it would have been the 30th, like late on the 30th or sometime on the 31st. Uh, her temple recommend was suspended. When he talks about going to work today, I think she was just in this habit of going to the temple very regularly. We've heard that from a few people now, and so he was basically giving her a heads up: don't go to the temple because you're not going to be allowed in. But then at some point before June 29th, she had gotten her temple recommend back because he alleges that she had lied to President Holmes in order to get it back. Now, these text messages that I'm about to show, in my opinion, a collision of agendas between Adam's agenda and Charles. On 6/28, again, this is about a week and a half before Charles was murdered, Adam sent Charles a text message stating that he had told his mother they needed to have a family meeting to hold Lori accountable and have her explain the things that she has been saying. Charles responded, "I will not be there. This is on her. I tried getting her help, and the entire family, except for you, put a scarlet letter on my forehead. The truth is, I put her back in Arizona so she could do her evil somewhere else. The only thing she's doing right is with JJ. That is debatable, but he doesn't understand why his mommy left him for," there we go. It was actually 72 days because it was 58 days. And then she said she needed to do something and then she would be back. And we know from one of these FOIA docs that she actually took I think it was a trip to Hawaii, and then she had, I think, a girls' weekend. But anyway, I will have all of the timeline lined up when I do that live. Okay. He doesn't understand why his mommy left him for 72 days, but she did, and she blames it all on me. Good luck, Adam, and my prayers are with all of you. I don't think it'll work because she knows she's special. So I point this out because I believe that this throws a monkey wrench in Adam's, what I believe is a revisionist claim now that Charles had asked him to come out to talk to Lori. The documents actually reveal what Charles' plan was. Okay. Charles then added, I'd get, and this was, sometimes it was, if it was really obvious, I mean, it takes a while to, kind of figure out these fonts because they switch from even different sections in the document. So if it's really obvious, I don't unredact every reference to some of these names, but this is Holmes and Gabe Bonilla. She's on a very dangerous path and thinks she's not. She truly thinks she's on a special mission on her 5th probation. So, I mean, this is something she actually told him. Again, this goes back to her impulse control. If she had the impulse control of a somewhat adjusted adult, she would not have been letting him know all of this information. It's bizarre. But anyway, from Heavenly Father himself, Charles would later tell Adam that if Mimi, Lori, Melanie, Colby, Summer, or Tylee knew the reason for the meeting, they would not show up. So, first of all, he's already saying that he doesn't think it's a good idea because he doesn't think that Lori can be persuaded. He makes this point again and again. She's too far gone, like that's not going to do anything. And then he lists all these family members, and what he's saying here and what he says elsewhere, even in this short snippet, that they're all pro Lori. So Adam's not going to be able to come in, have a meeting, and just like set them all straight, So, and then he makes the point that it would be moot, like they wouldn't even show up. And he also lets him know he wouldn't be there. Okay, so I'm going to go into somewhat in detail. These are text messages back and forth between Charles and Adam. Unlike most of the text messages in these FOIA docs, for some reason, they read bottom to top instead of top to bottom. So I'm not going to read all of this. These were texts that Charles had copied and pasted, either text and or emails. They were exchanges between him and Lori that he was passing on to Adam. And then there were some kind of technical issues, like he was letting Adam know how to see them. And then this is where it starts. So Adam tells him, this is on the 9th, I can fly tomorrow and come home on Saturday, or he meant on Sunday. Now, there is the possibility that they could have talked about this in a call. But in this next text, it indicates to me that it doesn't sound like something they had already negotiated, because Charles throws out, you want to see what I can do on Southwest? I just now landed in LA. He went to Los Angeles right before flying into Phoenix. So he's asking him, like, Adam just offers to come out there. And I think Charles was under the impression that Adam was going to go along with Charles' plan. And we'll go into the details of that. And so he offers to, I think what he's doing is using his Southwest points. Like that's how they flew me out after Joe had died. And he traveled so much. They had both said that, because I was obviously, grateful that he had used his points. And they had both said, he has lots of points because he travels all the time. So Adam says, sure. Then Charles says, how are you going to get everyone together without Lori knowing? So again, I draw attention to this because you can see from this question, he is not at all thinking that Adam is still flying out for, to talk with Lori and to meet with her family, and possibly to meet with his family. But he's not under the impression, that's why I should say, he's not under the impression that Adam is going to talk with Lori, because he's asking, how are you going to get the family together without Lori knowing? So then Adam says, I'm going to see Lori at her house and have a talk with her, and going to keep my phone on record. I'm sorry, on record. So tuck that away. That's an important note. Charles said, I think she'll leave, but it's worth a try. I mean, at this point, he's already offered to fly Adam out, and Charles is running out of options. And I very much agree with oh gosh, I can't think of her name off the top of my head. Is her name Sarah? No. The podcaster who was in this last episode of 2020, and I was actually interviewed by her. Yeah, she was the highlight of the entire show. She did an absolutely fantastic job, knocked it out of the park. But um and I forgot why I was saying that. Anyway, okay. She had made the point that, and I think it was a salient point. Charles was running out of options, and Adam was his only ally at this point. So he says, I think she'll leave, but it's worth a try. So Adam says, looks good. And by the way, you don't have to take my word for it. Anytime it says sent, that's Charles. Anytime it says read, because this came from Charles' phone, that is Adam. And Charles was the one reading it. So Adam said, looks good. Adam said, also have a family dinner with everyone. So Adam is just like making these plans, and they're not negotiating. He's just letting Charles know that, well, he's going to meet with Lori. He's going to record the conversation, and then he's going to have a family dinner with everyone. So that also includes Lori. So then Adam says, always leave my phone on to record what I say and what everyone else says, to have proof for Holmes. So this was the unredacted reference. I think there was also one other reference where it was left unredacted, because it was, beer o'clock somewhere. But then this is really key. Charles says, got it. But honestly, and I believe that this was Charles' plan. Honestly, if you, Zach fit in this, if you, Zach, I believe it was Zach, Brandon and me go to him, that should be enough. She will feel like we ambushed her, but something has to be done. She'll be real careful what she says. And Lori actually uses that word ambush when she was interviewed by Chandler police. So I do wonder if someone passed on that detail, because she did access Charles' phone, but not until later in the day after she had already been interviewed. But anyway, so then Charles says, send me your date of birth, blah, blah, blah. These are just details, trying to work out the reservation. And he said, work on it this morning. I have deniability. I'm not sure what Charles meant by that. Then Charles says, your flights are booked. You should have the emails. I'm really uneasy, and I don't know why this is whited out. This wasn't something I did, and it wasn't an intentional redaction. It was just some kind of hiccup. But I think it says, I'm really uneasy about how she will respond, not only to you, but to me. So he circles back around, like, I'm really uneasy with this plan. And someone else, and Brandon, that isn't Zach. I'm not sure who that was. I should have tried to unredact that. I'll pick up JJ and take him to school at 8 a.m. Thursday. She'll be there. Friday, the same. She will be highly suspicious about recording. Then he offers Adam this piece of advice. If you can bring a second device and put your phone on the counter or turn it off, it might help. Just a brother talking to his sister. I personally feel she's too far gone. It is going to take us going to, and this is Holmes, or she won't ever stop. She's hurting too many families. Mine is gone, Adam. I just want to save others from the same fate. I still love her more than life. But and he meant Lori. He corrects the autocorrect here. But the Lori we knew is gone. I fear forever. Then Adam says, okay. Okay, so this is the day they both fly into Phoenix. Charles asks Adam, are you in Phoenix? Adam, yeah, we're going to Summers. I'll call you in a bit. Even that detail about Summers, I'll go into that in another live, but it's very weird because Zach, according to someone's testimony, Zach stayed at Summers, but Adam stayed with his parents. So that's another detail that's very odd. Like, he lives in Kansas. He doesn't get to see Zach that much, I would imagine. And then if these accounts are true and accurate, why wouldn't he stay with Zach? Why would he stay with his parents, especially if there's all this the tension? And Charles has already said, like, hey, they're all pro Lori, And so, okay, so it's just something to kind of tuck away. Charles said, I've got a meeting at 7:30. We know from the FOIA docs that was most likely his date. We do know that he went on a date with a woman. I do reference something that she says in this line. Call before you go see Lo. And then Charles sent Adam something. We don't know what the attachment is. If you've never seen this, do it immediately. I love this guy. He has our gospel and doesn't know it. So this is the day of his death. It's 1:33 in the morning. UTC time, UTC -7. So yeah, I think that's Phoenix time. Yeah, I think so. Then we all, most people who have been following this case know that Charles had said on July 11th, this is the day he was murdered, he gets to Lori's house and he says, Al is here. Then he follows up at Lori's. Then Adam, and I'm sorry, Adam has some pretty serious narcissistic tendencies, but he makes it about himself. Really, I wonder why he never called me back. Now, I'm not trying to be unfair or cruel to Adam, but and we don't know how much Adam knows. Detective Moffat did make a reference that he may have known more than he suggested in the 2020 episode. I talk about that more in this live. But here Charles would have been filled with anxiety, and all the more because of an exchange that he had with Lori shortly before he flew into Phoenix. So this is Charles, and I'm sorry, it looks like I didn't include the date on this. I think this was a week before he came out. The backstory on this is he and Lori were going back and forth, and you'll see this. He wanted to stay at the house. Like, Charles' mentality was, I'm paying for this house. I'm not getting a hotel. I'm staying at the house. You can go stay in a hotel. And he had just found out, I think this was right after he found out that Lori was cheating on him. He had suspicions dating back to early 2019. But then he found this email that Lori had sent in his name. It was a contrived email address. And I think he found it on June 29th. I don't have the timeline memorized, but it was late June. And they had a very heated exchange about this. And I think that this exchange was pretty soon after that. Anyway, okay, Charles says, I don't enjoy fighting with you, but you need to be stopped from destroying so many more lives than you already have with your whacked out delusions. You've made our beautiful gospel a thing of horror. That will stop. Just take care of JJ till you get out where you belong. I'm not sure what he meant by that. There was a text that he had sent Lori at one point, like, basically, watch your back. There will be a new mommy for JJ and stuff. But so I mean, the poor guy, like he was going through hell and back. I'm just trying to be as fair to the facts as possible. But so just keep me updated on how our boy is doing. That's all for now. Pick him up, ? I'm staying at my house. Lori said, no, you are not. Jason, and I believe that this was Mel, will make sure of that. Get a hotel or stay with Brandon, your best friend. Now, there no text messages or emails have surfaced between Charles and Brandon, and we'll talk more about that in another live. So I think this may have been more of Lori's suspicion. I do believe that Brandon at this point was on board, but he's being careful because keep in mind he had also been identified as a dark spirit, and especially once Charles was murdered, he was understandably very afraid. So Charles said, no, is he on the lease? I'll have the police there if he tries. It's my house. And you go stay with your boyfriend at his hotel since he's making so much money writing a book for me. That's a reference to this email that Lori had sent in Charles' name, where basically Charles was sending an email to Chad saying, I'm writing this book. Thank you for your offer to help me, yada, yada, yada. I will pay you handsomely to ghostwrite this book for me. Anyway, Lori says, okay, Joe Ryan. And then she's referring to Jason. He is the police. He is retired. He is not on the lease. Even he can't do anything. So she makes no sense because she's a child. But this reference to, okay, Joe Ryan, this is significant. I'll just read this last sentence. You leave when I get there and no issues. Well, Charles ended up staying in a hotel and Lori had reserved the hotel for him. But Lori referring to Charles as Joe Ryan, I think was a shot across the bow. They were married when Alex assaulted Joe, and there was tension between Charles and Joe. I won't go into that. It was heated on both sides. But Lori referring to him as Joe Ryan, that would have caused him some concern. And I don't know, one, if Joe was murdered, and I did a very long live using the pictures from his welfare check, indicating I do believe that at minimum there are unanswered questions, and there's evidence, at least it appears, that Joe thought he was meeting up with Tylee. I won't go into all of that, but there are very strange things in those pictures, and that's not just me as a sister trying to find the boogeyman in these pictures, but you can decide for yourself if you are so inclined. That is on my Analytics channel. If you search Annie Cushing, Joseph Ryan, it will pop up. Okay, so, all right, let's go back to their exchange. So Charles is at the house and he has seen that Alex's truck is at Lori's house. His mind had to be reeling at this point because, one, Alex lived in the area. He lived minutes from Lori. So why would he have been there that early in the morning? Did he spend the night? And Charles would have known for sure Alex's role in the murder plan. And we don't know, one, if Joe was indeed murdered, what Charles might have known about that. But I do at least suspect that some of Charles' freak out early on, and I think I think, and I'm not making excuses for Gilbert police, and again, certainly Gabe did him no favors, but I think I just question if some of Charles, really panicked response to these threats were because he was aware of what Lori and her family were capable of. And we already see Lori cannot keep secrets. And I've referred to this. I'll never share the details. I don't plan on ever sharing the details. But there was something that Lori had said in that 2007 vacation. And I'm not doing this again for like a BuzzFeed effect. It was just something that was so salacious. It was this reference to something she did with some of her family members that was so just disgusting. But I just remember, at the time, just like thinking, like, what the hell? Like, if this is true, and there would be no reason not to believe her statement, but it it just showed like this family, this family, they didn't have appropriate boundaries, and she didn't have that ability to curb, like if this thing she did with her family, I'm not trying to make it sound worse than it is, but it was really gross. And there is one person who knows. But uh, but if it's true, and there was a reference to this event, but it included one other person in this document that I have, which one person has seen. And I only do that just because, one, I trust this person implicitly, but also so that people don't have to just take my word for it. And I share who that is in the group. I'm not putting that out publicly, but there is a reference to this, to at least it was either another incident or the same one. But it was just one more thing in the back of my mind, like she has no internal editor, like she just like if it runs across her mind, it tumbles out of her mouth. So anyway, okay, so Adam says they are planning something. Charles replies, absolutely. Adam replies, again, that let's make this all about Adam. Here Charles had to be like really freaked out, but Adam's like, I was supposed to. I'm sorry, I shouldn't assign a tone. I was supposed to spend the night at his house last night. She probably blocked that. And Charles' response, I'm not trying to add undue weight or trying to wax poetic or add, unnecessary dramatic impact. But his response is, what you do is up to you. And I feel like it comes across like he's exhausted. He has to focus on what is right in front of him. And he does not care about Adam's hurt feelings at this point. And it's almost, and I hesitate to say this because I really try not to, engage in any kind of hyperbole. All I can say is, to me, it almost has this like JC Judas vibe, like whatever he said, like what you do quickly or whatever, it just has this like vibe of like, whatever, dude, like I don't care. What you do is up to you. I might be assigning motive that he didn't intend, but that was Charles' last text to Adam. Then Adam replied, I'm going to put pressure to have him come get me right now. See what he says. And then Adam replied, I think he was replying to what you do is up to you. He just replied, okay. And then he followed up again. Me and Zach are going to the Stake Center tonight at 8 to play basketball. The redaction fit Holmes is always there, either playing ball. And he did make another reference to Holmes and playing ball somewhere else. It might have been redacted and his name fit in there. He's always there, either playing ball or interviewing people. I will try to catch him to have a conversation with my old friend. So following up this, the last point that I'll make till I move on to the next main point. Adam reneges on both promises that he made to Charles. The first promise was that he was going to record Lori. So he told Charles he would talk to Lori and record the conversation. The second promise was that he would talk to Holmes. And we see the first promise, I'm not going to read all of it. I don't think it's all relevant. You can go back over it if you're so inclined. Adam said Lori has given people blessings, which she is not allowed to do in the LDS church. Adam said he was going to speak with the stake president, that's Holmes, but he was not able to. Adam said he was going to record Lori, but was not able to. Now, this I only highlight in red if it just really jumps out at me. Adam said his family was upset with him for wanting to do so. And that really caught my attention because I was just like, wait, hold up. Why would Adam have been telling his family his plan to record them? Like he was planning to meet up with Lori and record her. Then he was planning to meet up with his family and record them. But I think, I make the note here, Adam's compulsion to be the, perpetual victim kind of may have tripped him up here. Now, this is a summary that most likely Detective Moffat wrote up afterwards. So I didn't go back and listen to the entire interview again. But for him to say, like, you know what? Hey, like I'm the one who's suffering here. I'm suffering too. I mean, he wasn't saying he was suffering and not Charles, obviously, but he's playing the victim. Like his family was upset with him for this plan of surreptitiously wanting to record them. Adam said these beliefs that Lori has are outside of the LDS church. Adam said the stake Lori went to was on Riggs Road, and the stake president he was going to meet with was President Holmes. I believe that's Holmes. Adam said President Holmes had interviewed both Charles and Lori, and he felt, and we don't know who that he is. I'm assuming it was Charles. He felt Lori lied, or it might have been even referring to Adam, clearly not Holmes. He felt Lori lied to keep her temple recommend. Maybe it was Holmes. Maybe this was, kind of post-mortem. We don't know. Adam said Charles had tried to get Lori's temple recommend taken away in hope that she would snap out of this. Okay, Adam's family stories don't align. This is a really big one for me because there weren't that many details, but let's jump in. So what I did, and this was in the Cool Cats and Criminal group, that's where I've done a lot of these kind of deep dives. But what I did was I went through Nicole's email and extracted timelines. Now, I mean, that is obviously clearly a strong proclivity to me. And this is a little off topic, but I actually, as a kid, I think I was around 10 or something. I actually went through the entire encyclopedia set and made timelines. I actually flipped through them. I didn't read all of the encyclopedias. I'm dating myself by even referencing encyclopedias, but I do think it's kind of funny in retrospect that I went through this. I believe I made it through the entire set because I had a stack of papers and with like these hand-drawn timelines where I anytime I found a date, I added it to this timeline. So that little project that I was obsessed with for who knows how many months has served me well. Okay, back to the point. In her account on Thursday, obviously, Charles is shot in the morning. Adam and Zach go to Tucson that afternoon to visit Adam and Nicole's friend. Huge red flags with that, but we will get to those red flags. She says that they go to Tucson, and I reference one because in the post, what I'll do is if I have a lot of details like this, I'll drop a screenshot and I'll have like little number balls in the screenshot. So let's refer to that. I want to read the first sentence first, though, because we will come back to this. Remember, my husband, and this is Nicole, obviously. Remember, my husband is there to help Charles, and the family doesn't know why Adam is there. He didn't tell anyone. That's why he came. Now, at this point, he had already, gone and come back to Kansas. This was, almost a month later. So clearly, there's some kind of breakdown here because why would his family have been upset with him for his plan to record their conversation if they didn't even know why he was there? So I don't know, it's just it's some of these things you just kind of have to tuck away because they'll come back up in another document, or they'll emerge in one of these shows. But okay, Adam and my son Zach went to Tucson that afternoon. So this is Thursday. Adam never heard back from Charles. He even called me, said, "I'm worried sick. I think Alex and Lori did something to Charles. He hasn't texted or called me." So first, red flags there, because if Adam called her on Thursday, said he was worried sick, and that he thought Alex and Lori did something to Charles, it begs the question, why did he leave for Tucson? Why did he take off? We'll get to this in a moment, but I will just mention it, and I'll back it up with an actual screenshot. But we found out from Charles' date that Charles had planned to meet Adam after he dropped JJ off. So, again, that's just another piece of the puzzle. Like, well, why would he have taken off for Tucson if it's true that he left on Thursday? Well, we know the one thing their stories align on is that at some point Adam and Zach went to Tucson. They're just not aligned on the date. But it just begs the question: why did Adam go dark? Well, why would he leave at all if he's scared? Why wouldn't he call law enforcement? Why wouldn't he say, "Hey, I'm worried sick. I think Alex and Lori had something to do with it"? And I will do a very deep dive into the fact that Chandler police were suspicious. They suspected that this was not a justifiable homicide the day Charles was shot. Why they didn't arrest Alex and or Lori is beyond me. I do have some theories. I'll talk about that in another live. Okay, so Zach's timeline. Thursday, and I state this: Charles was shot in the morning, just because I try to be as detailed as possible, and I try not to operate under the assumption that someone has been following this case for the past 2+ years. They might have joined the group and aren't very familiar. They'll join the group and they'll say, "Who's Joe Ryan? Who's Tylee?" So that's why I just try to be as explicit as possible. All right, Thursday, Zach goes to work. In his story, Adam goes out to eat with Janice and Barry Cox, so his parents, and then goes to the house afterwards. Now, I'm assuming that's Janice and Barry's house. We don't know. And Zach and Adam go to play basketball. So that's Zach's account of Thursday. All right, Friday, Nicole confirms that Adam is in Tucson. That's number 2. She says, now it's Friday. And so this is, after she says that they left for Tucson, I get a text message from my mother-in-law that says, Coco, I guess that's her name. They have to give everyone shortened nicknames. That was very sweet of you to let Adam use your miles to come down here. We enjoy him so much. Just wish you could have come too. Love you. I think she's trying to trap her. There are question marks. Who did they? Because we know that Lori was able to access Charles' phone. That we will definitely talk about in another live, because that's a whole nother thing. Anyway, then okay, I have to stay focused. All right, Charles has been dead 24 hours now. Everyone knows in the family, and not one of them has called me or Adam or Zach. They know Adam is in Tucson. Why wouldn't you call your son? So, she doubles down on Adam is in Tucson. Let's see what Zach says. Zach said Adam and Zach, these are my notes. Adam and Zach go to see Zach's second cousins after Zach got off work. So Friday, Zach went to work as usual, and then they went to see Zach's second cousins. Zach texts Colby to see if he wanted to go play basketball and gets no response. Adam or Zach, it wasn't clear in his interview. And I got this from his interview with Justin Lum. That's out there. You can Google it. Again, I'm going to make this whole presentation available. So, and if anyone ever catches an error, you can let me know. You can, let me know in a comment, an email. My email is annie@annielytics.com. I will publish a correction. Again, if I agree with it, we might just disagree on, some details. But anyway, okay, Adam or Zach, it wasn't clear from what he said. Texts Alex to see if he wanted to go to the comedy club and gets no response from him either. So in Zach's timeline, they were still in Phoenix on Friday, the day after Charles was shot. Saturday. In Nicole's timeline, Adam and Zach returned to Phoenix from Tucson. Let's go to point number 3. Saturday comes. Adam can't stop thinking about Charles. His best friend, Dr. Lane, says, "What's his name?" So now Adam is worried. As of Thursday, he doesn't show up for, he's supposed to have this meeting with Charles. He knows that Charles didn't show up if Adam did. And Adam makes the point. Charles always had his phone with him, and they weren't getting any responses. So obviously there were many things that would have been causing him red flags. So it is mystifying to me that 2 days could pass, and he could, at this point, he's already been at their friend's house for 2 days. And then his friend is like, "Hey, you know what? What's this guy's name?" All right. And so he asked what's his name and Googled it. Sure enough, pops up what they said happened, family dispute. She writes kind of stream of consciousness. So I'm trying to kind of fill things in a little bit responsibly. Adam and Zach just broke down. Adam knew immediately his own brother and sister killed him. So Adam and Zach drive back to Phoenix to Janice and Barry's house, his parents, who have yet to call any of us. So odd. Now, what's missing in here is, at this point, now, see, she had already said that he thought on Thursday that Alex and Lori had something to do with the shooting. Obviously, Alex. Well, anyway, no, he didn't know that according to his statement, he didn't know that Charles was shot at that point, but he thought that Alex and Lori had something to do with Charles going dark. But then this begs the question, even if he really didn't find out until Saturday that Charles was dead, and I'm sorry, I do not believe this. I just don't. It's just asking too much, and he has too many Cox tendencies of revisionist history. But even if this is the case, so we'll suspend reality for a moment and say, okay, he didn't Google Charles' name. No one told him that Charles had been shot and killed by Alex. When he finds out from his friend supposedly Googling it, why wouldn't he have reached out to law enforcement then? Even if you're scared, even if he said, "You know what? I'm not going back to Phoenix. I'm going to drive this rental car with my son to Kansas. I am afraid for my life. I'm going to take off." So even if he's afraid, why wouldn't he have called police at this point? And if he had called police when he actually found out that Charles had been killed or suspected that something had happened to him, because he could have called in a welfare check. In fact, fun fact, someone in Texas, in Houston, actually called in a welfare check on Charles. I think it was the day after he was shot. I just thought that was an interesting note. It's like, whoa, here you have someone calling in a welfare check right away. We don't know who it was or what made them suspicious. Maybe it was a family member because they couldn't get a hold of their dad or brother or whatever. But someone called in a welfare check. But they called it in to his home in Houston. So anyway, okay. All right, Saturday in Zach's timeline, Adam and Zach drive up to Tucson to visit Adam and Nicole's friend. Now, Adam flew out Sunday, so in Zach's account, they would have had to either come back Saturday night or the next day. But there should not be this much of a disconnect in these timelines. Like, these should be the easy things to address. Like, there are some things like memories are going to fade and things like that. But when you find out that this person you cared about was killed, and according to Adam, it was 2 days after he was killed, you start rehearsing everything. You go over everything in your mind again and again and again. I mean, I've been back over conversations from 2007. Not, like, you try to remember as accurately as possible. I try to be very transparent about, like, this was 2007. There are some things that, like, especially if they are really impactful, like that conversation that Lori had with it wasn't even a conversation. It was a passing reference to something, and I don't think that she even caught, like, just how inappropriate this thing was that she had said. But you go back over things, and everything would have been fresh in their memory. And even with them waiting almost a month before talking to law enforcement, that's still only a month away. Like, it doesn't, it's only a month in their rear view mirror, like, their memories should be pretty solid. They would have talked about these things, so it is very strange. And we don't know where the truth lies, so it's one of the frustrations in all this. Okay, so I mentioned this earlier. Nancy Jo was the woman who Charles had a date with. Charles had a number of women he was messaging. He was on a dating app, but he was also messaging women over GChat. Excuse me. I'm talking too much. I need to take a drink. But I don't know why they wouldn't have redacted her name. There were a few people who reached out to law enforcement that I just, yeah. Anyway, so she had a date with Charles, and she reached out to Chandler Police to share her perspective. It says Nancy Jo said Adam had come into town at the same time. So this was July 10th, but she was unsure where from. Nancy Jo said Charles and Adam were supposed to meet on 7-Eleven after Charles dropped JJ off at school to discuss how to confront Lori about her beliefs that she was a god and here to usher in the second coming of Christ. Nancy Jo said Charles and Adam wanted to get Lori help for those behaviors. So, this is just backing up what I had said earlier, that here, this is another thing that is just a question that's out there that hasn't been answered. Like, this alone, like, I mean, Charles flew him out. Charles was so borderline obsessed. He was talking with people he shouldn't have been talking about. Like, he was trying to, in my opinion, he was trying to convince Lori's family. He was, sending things to Tylee, and because she references it in January that he sent her texts about their church. And I mean, he was talking to anyone who would listen. And, so, excuse me. Excuse me. So, I mean, Charles brought Adam out. Like, this was the whole point of their meeting. So the fact that, according to Nancy Jo, which she's saying she heard this from Charles, that they were supposed to meet, and Adam Obviously Charles was a no-show. He wasn't answering text messages, and again, it begs so many questions. Okay. Let's see. Yep, same thing. Okay, was Adam paralyzed by fear? And I really want to tiptoe through the tulips on this one. I don't want to make light of the fact that I have no doubt that he was fearful. There was a lot to be afraid of. But I'm going to play this part of the 2020 episode, and I will address some issues I have with this.
Were you worried about the other people in Lori's world, considering that you were thinking about the idea that she might have been involved in these deaths? After we found out Charles was dead, we left Phoenix. We were scared to death. And we thought, are we in trouble? Are we in danger? So we locked the doors. We didn't know what to think. You thought you might be killed. Yeah, so we thought we would be killed for the next 2 months. All we did was lock our doors. I slept with a gun by my thing, thinking my brother could possibly come shoot us and kill us. It's like you're living under siege at that point. Yeah.
Okay. Again, I have no doubt that they experience a significant amount of fear. However, this just begs the question all the more. If he was so afraid for their welfare that he was sleeping with a gun by his bed, and he was afraid that Alex would shoot him, shoot his family, just show up and kill his family. Again, why wouldn't he have gone to law enforcement? Why live with that level of fear? And clearly you're afraid because you believe that according to this story, you believe that they killed Charles. And and then another question here is his reference to 2 months. Again, I know I do have some tendencies to like zero in on details, and that may or may not make sense to other people. But I walked away from this thinking that is oddly specific. Like, why was he only afraid for the next 2 months? The next 2 months would have bumped up to the time that the kids, now that we now know the kids went missing. And this is one of my questions that I have for Adam and for many of these family members. Like, no one had verified that Tylee was alive. No one had any kind of verification beyond early September that JJ was alive at that point. And I'll share the or mid-September, I should say. It was mid-September that I'll address in my surprises in the FOIA docs, because it was a detail that hasn't been talked about in any of these shows or podcasts or anything. But so here he's so afraid that he's sleeping with a gun, but then at the time that the kids go dark and no one can verify that they're alive, he's no longer afraid. Why? It just doesn't make sense. Why would he have only been afraid for 2 months? And it almost seems to me, again, trying to be fair, this is just my theory, but it almost seems like he has to cut it off at the point that the kids go missing, because if he said that he was afraid of all of 2019, then people would ask, then why didn't you call in a welfare check? He talks even in this episode about how Brandon called him after he was shot at, and again I think he doubles down on like he was the only one standing by Brandon, but there is no mention, unless it was redacted, which there isn't any evidence of law enforcement completely redacting like anyone reaching out to law enforcement unless it's like critical to their case. But there isn't any reference to Adam. And I searched for Adam. I searched for the word brother. There is, again, that I could find. And I did read every word of of that document. That's not to say that I am above error, but this was one of the things that I was looking for. But there's no evidence that even after Brandon was shot at, that he participated in the investigation into that attempted murder. Excuse me. While now saying, with all confidence, like obviously he believes that this was Alex. But then that also begs the question, okay, so once Brandon was shot at, here now you have one person who's dead because he was a dark spirit. And now you have another person who almost died. And this is one of my greatest frustrations with this case. Why wasn't a welfare check called at least at that point? They knew by September, this whole network of people, they knew that Lori and the kids were in Rexburg. They just didn't know the apartment number, but anyone could have reached out to Rexburg police and said, hey, it's in this apartment complex. And here, Kay had passed on pictures of Alex's truck. They knew everything. Like you can find people with with an address and no apartment number, and they could have found them at any point. There's also no evidence that excuse me, that Kay ever told Detective Moffat that they had found them in Rexburg. She only said on, I think it was like September 26th, Nicole had reached out to her because Brandon had reached out to Nicole. And somehow I don't understand, but Brandon's son found out that they had moved out of state. So yeah, lots of questions there, but no one had passed this information on. But at the point that Brandon was shot at, now you have two people who had been identified as dark spirits and were either shot and killed or shot at. And it doesn't appear that at any point any of these family members thought back to let's see, who else has been identified as a dark spirit? Oh, the darkest of all spirits who were alive was Tylee. The only one who was darker than Tylee was her dad and my brother Joe. I think he was like a 4.3 D for dark, and I think she was a 4.2 D for dark. And Chad had made this distinction in this email that that Charles had been talking about. Even Melanie at the time, Boudreaux, like when she interviews with I think it was in her interview with East Idaho News, and we will definitely have a live about Melanie. She's an interesting diabolical character in my opinion, but she said something about how I think it was Adam or Brandon had, I think it was Adam, had confronted her about and she referenced these, light and dark ratings. And she kind of talks about how it was just so overwhelming for her and confusing and stuff. But the fact that even she knew about it, Charles was talking to everyone who would listen, but no one, and again, I don't want to get too far off base, but however, I think that this is a very important point that now Adam's coming forward, 2+ years later, I shouldn't say playing the victim, claiming to be, an outcast, and assuming this role of he was the only one in the family who stood by Charles, and then he stood by Brandon and no one else did. But what you see is this inaction, and you hear him afraid, but he never for that entire first month, he doesn't reach out to police. And if you think back to the timing that Nicole, and I meant to make this point earlier, the timing that Nicole reached out to them. She emailed Detective Moffat on August 8th after telling, according to Kay, telling Kay even in, I think it was like July 20th or something, that, she's reached out to Detective Moffat. She just hasn't heard back from him yet, which was not true according to Detective Moffat. But here you have, this was August 8th. This was only 5 days after Detective Moffat's interview with Bobby. So here, Detective Moffat tells Bobby, hey, Adam's sketch, don't trust Adam. You definitely pick up on a level of panic in his reference to he's tried to call Kay 3 times. And then he said, I'm going to try to call her again. So he really wants to get this message across. Like, whatever you have going with Adam and Nicole, I wouldn't trust. Well, you shouldn't add in Nicole. He identified Adam. And he was, even suspicious of his motive for now getting involved, which I share in that suspicion, because now it's 5 days after Detective Moffat says he sketched. Now, all of a sudden, out of the blue, they both show up. So, all right, moving on. Just a few of my questions for Adam. Why visit a friend in Tucson? I've already hit on that. It just makes no sense. Why not call the police? Why make light of Tylee's dark rating? Why didn't Tylee know where Lori was if she was thicker than thieves with Lori and Alex? Why didn't you call in a welfare check? Why didn't you call Gilbert police for Brandon? And, if he did, they've redacted it, withheld it, accidentally didn't include it in the FOIA docs. There could be other explanations. All I can say is that I have not seen any evidence that Adam participated in that investigation. If you find evidence of the opposite, please let me know. All right, number 8, the proverbial smoking gun, ? I'm ending with this. I do want to exercise a particular level of caution with this, because it does involve unredacting a redaction. I've already laid out, all of the caveats and stuff. But with this one, because it's particularly impactful, I just want to be that much more careful. Please do not state this as a fact. Don't state this as, I said that Adam was this person who was identified. Please exercise caution. Having said that, anyway, okay. All right. I'm not going to read the whole first part. Prior to the murder of Charles Vallow, I also observed several text messages. The reason I type over words, that's for transparency, but in this case, I added like a red line. I zoomed way in and figured out like the width of a space between a lowercase t and the next letter, because I suspected that they included the space in this redaction. And sometimes it could be accidental, but sometimes they'll do different things, probably because they're like, that ant, she won't stay in her lane, let's throw an extra space in. But that's all the more reason we have to be careful, because for all we know, they could have added an extra space at the other end. They typically don't do that. But I have found 2 instances where, whether it was intentional or not, the space before or after the word was included in the redaction, but you can tell by the space. Okay, all right. I also observed several text messages between she, referring to Lori, and Melanie Boudreau. Whoever was writing this part of the report did not know how to spell Boudreau, and because there was one time where they left Boudreau unredacted and left the X off. But we can tell it's Melanie by the no E. These text messages would lead me to believe that someone was aware of what was going to take place. Now, I believe that this is a reference to Charles shooting. That is a bit of an assumption on my part. The only name that fit in this redaction, I will show a screenshot with all of the name, not all of the names, but the names like before and after Adam to show you like how close it is. But if at any point someone says, "Hey, have you tried, whatever name," I'm willing to do that. But anyway, so okay. If this is referring to what I think it is, and if Adam is the correct name in the redaction, all the caveats apply. This points to the possibility that Adam may have known ahead of time the plan to kill Charles. This isn't relevant to this particular point. I will go back over parts of Detective Moffat's statement to Bobby, the parts that are relevant. He had said, and you can listen to the recording again, just from text messages I've seen of his, or at least between Lori and Alan, he's being very careful. I applaud how careful he's being. He's talking more like you would expect someone from law enforcement or like a reporter, or a lawyer, being very, very careful. So just from the text messages I've seen of his, and he's talking about Adam, or at least between Lori and Al. So it appears that there was some kind of back and forth between Lori and Al that may have given Adam away. I don't know that Adam's very trustworthy. That's one of the reasons I called Kay 3 times last night. Now I filled in, anytime you see these square brackets, there were other words, but he was referring to Charles and Adam. He might have said they or something like that. Charles and Adam were talking up to that day. So that day being the day Charles was murdered. But I think Adam may have called Lori afterwards. So I just don't know that he's very trustworthy or where he lies in this. Now, he had said elsewhere in the interview, if you haven't listened to the interview and you're really wanting to follow this case closely, I highly recommend listening to it. But he talks about how, they had been going through Charles' phone, and, so they didn't get a search warrant for his iCloud records for, I think it was like 9 months. So, but they had been going through his phone, and there are interesting details around Charles' phone, which I'll cover in another live. This is what I was talking about. Like, this is a snippet of that list. This is Adam's name. You can tell the next closest name is Barry Cox, and it is not that close. When you're talking about these redactions, this is a pretty big gap. Julie Rowe, she had nothing to do. She's not mentioned in any of the Arizona documents that I remember. I put in even things like his mother, her mother, things like that. Colby Ryan, Jason Mel, her mother, and then Zach Cox. Zach's name is not spelled with an H, but in one of the documents, they spelled Zach's name with an H. So, anytime I see like even a misspelled reference, I'll add it to this list. Alex Cox is significantly shorter. So that's just out of like full disclosure. So, all right, that's what I have. I was intending on keeping this live shorter. As I got into it, I thought, no, it didn't, and especially because of how sensitive this particular topic is. I just wanted to be extra careful. So, all All right, it is late, but I will spend a few minutes just taking people's questions. My hair got a little messed up here, and I'm not even sure. Yes, you can see me. One thing that helps me with questions is if you just put the word question in all caps. That will help me. It'll help it stand out a little bit. All right. Okay. Thank you, Kathy S. All right. Adam Cox, the subject of the second grand jury. I don't think so. The second grand jury that was in Fremont County. So, and I don't think Adam is the subject of any investigation. The reason that I think that is, well, there are a couple reasons, but one, they really need to focus. I believe that they're thinking they really need to focus on the obvious characters. They're not even bringing charges against Chad. I kind of took it on the chin a little bit when I first unredacted this document before we had the additional FOIA document where I found out like practically the entire affidavit of probable cause. I think that's what it's called. Was in there. You just had to. It was a fishing expedition. But yeah, I mean, even with Chad, you see him like having these text exchanges. You see in Zulema's involvement now. She has some kind of use immunity agreement. I don't know if that is for Arizona as well as Idaho. We don't know, but clearly no charges have been brought against her. But the fact that no charges have been brought against Chad, even though they recommended that I'm sorry, I really try not to make that mistake, that Chad also be charged. And I kind of felt like they just dropped that on the prosecutor because they said in the affidavit of probable cause that there was no evidence that Chad participated in the planning of the shooting. So it's just like, well, you dropped that bomb. Well, why recommend him at all that he be charged? But I think my opinion is that they kicked the can down the street so that maybe some of this ire from the true crime community, people following the case, wouldn't fall on them. That may or may not be fair, but it sure seems that way. Like, what a bummer. We were really hoping that the prosecutor would also charge Chad. So yeah, I mean, if they're not even charging Chad, and we don't even know that Adam did anything illegal, like, obviously I can't stress enough caution. Okay. Looking. Yeah, someone said very disturbing, but exactly what I feared regarding Adam. I know this is a thick and chewy cookie. I mean, this is a lot to absorb. I did as much digging as I did just because one, I want to be fair. I want to be fair to the facts. But yeah, it's a lot. And you find out like following this case, like there were things that we were all so sure about, like at one point, and then information gets dropped, at another point later on, like another FOIA doc or something, and you're like, oh, like there was a reference to Julie in I think it was the affidavit of probable cause that came out of Chandler, and we were like, J. Rowe, what's she doing in here? Well, it's not Julie Rowe, it was another Julie Clement. And so it's just like information, it just kind of trickles out, but then there are times where it just there's a flood of information. One thing that is important to note is that we are not going to get these FOIA docs from Idaho. Rob Wood explained to me that Idaho treats the Freedom of Information Act very differently. So all they have to say, and he did say that this wasn't privileged information. Like he specifically noted that. So he said all they have to say is it's part of an ongoing investigation and they don't have to share it. But honestly, I'm glad because these FOIA docs, I'm not trying to like cry victim myself, but they take a lot of time. Okay. I'm just looking to see, I'm looking from the most current, just to see if anyone has any questions. Try to pull the microphone away when I swallow because I realized that in listening to some of my lives, like, oh my gosh, that microphone picks up everything. Okay. Cresha. Let them duke it out on the scales of justice. I don't know what that is in reference to, but I suspect, oh my gosh, when these trials come around, I do know, and Rob had also specifically said he has only shared information that could be shared publicly with me, to my memory, and I don't even remember the exact number, but it was in the tens of thousands of pages. I think at the time we talked, it was somewhere around 25,000 pages. That's just Idaho. So, yeah, I mean, these trials, they're, and it looks like there will be at least 2. That's if Chad and Lori are tried together. If they're tried separately, 3, because then Lori will be extradited to, is that the right word? Extradited? Yeah. To Arizona, where she will go on trial for her role in conspiracy to commit murder. So this is just going to be the non-gift that keeps on giving. Yeah, yes, someone reiterated my point exactly. He meaning Adam was afraid for his life and not that of his son. And that of his son, I'm sorry, but not for the children. Why not? And again, I think that's why he has that really weird cutoff of like for 2 months. I mean, 3 months later, Lori and Melanie were actually in Kansas. Now, they weren't near where Adam lived, but, they weren't completely out of the woods there. Now, I don't agree with the sentiment that like everyone who was on this list who had been identified as a zombie was necessarily going to be murdered. I don't think that was the plan because you actually see in one of Lori's text exchange, a bizarre text exchange with Alex, where she's like playing this guessing game with him. Like, in their mind, there were 24 zombies. And she had just identified the 24th zombie, which I believe was Zach Cox. His name fits in the redaction, but she plays this guessing game with Alex. And she's like, guess who? And Alex is like, Brandon. And I will talk about Alex more in another live. He was very slow. And I do think that Lori manipulated that. No, he's evil. But I do think that his lack of intelligence made him very susceptible to her. And she infantilized him like she did all of these players, even at one point calling him a good boy. And he was the older brother, so and that's a solid pattern. I will address this whole thread of arrested development among all of these players, and how Lori also was a case study in Arrested Development, while at the same time manipulating others' Arrested Development. It's mind-boggling. But yeah, and I will have a live just about the issue of who I think the ringleader was. But okay. Okay, let's see. Okay, Jean, you make a really good point. She said, I will never understand why Alex was allowed to have a gun to shoot, since he was convicted assaulting Joe Ryan, serving time in jail. That came up in the FOIA docs, and because who was it? Cole had brought that question to Detective Moffat, and because he understandably was like, I don't think that this guy was allowed to carry, because he had assaulted one of Lori's other ex-husbands. And Detective Moffat told him no, he was allowed, because he had, I think he said something to the effect of like he had done his time, or he didn't say that. I forget how he put it, but he assuaged Cole's concerns and said no, he was allowed to. But then this was a subject. It was back and forth with, this was after the kids were discovered that, that they were missing. The FBI was involved, and all of these agencies were working together. So emails were flying back and forth. I mean, I'll do one live that on a massive spreadsheet. Well, it's like kind of a database that I created just to track down the answers around questions. A particular question. I won't go into it. It's already so late. But the emails were flying among all of these different members of law enforcement, 2 different FBI offices, Salt Lake and Phoenix, and then Gilbert, Chandler, Rexburg, and Fremont County, and Phoenix. And so like all of these, different questions were being, kind of bandied about. And someone from the FBI was assigned the task to find out if Alex was allowed to carry a firearm. And this I will reveal, because you asked about this. No, it's someone from Detective Moffat. I don't know if he was operating under assumption. I will address Chandler police. I mean, there are serious concerns that I have with their investigation. It may be arrogance on my part to question some of the things that I've been questioning. I try not to let that get in my way, as well as the fact that I have absolutely zero training in law enforcement. Any legal training. My training is watching some true crime over 20 years, a lot of true crime, way too much true crime, and common sense and research, but yeah, and I always disclose that. And I love it when trolls are like, she doesn't have any business addressing this. I'm like, I've said that myself, but there are some things that it's all it takes is just collecting the information, so. And I never try to come across as like an expert in anything other than data. But I present the information, and it's like, I feel like a server at a restaurant. Like I'm serving it up. I mean, you can throw it on the floor. You can eat it, vomit it up later, say, this dish was shit. And like, I mean, like, I'm just serving it up. We're all adults here. You do with it what you will. Having said that, an analyst, an FBI analyst, was assigned this task, and she came back, and she had reached out to Texas to ask them about this. This was Travis County. That's where Joe was assaulted. And someone from Travis County had told her the only way in Texas that Alex would have had his, I think they call it his rights restored, would have been if his record had been expunged. And so she had made the point, the fact that you found this crime in his record is indicator that his record wasn't expunged. So in the state of Texas, if your record isn't expunged, your rights aren't restored. He would have never been legally allowed to carry a firearm. And so so some of these things that Detective Moffat said, some of the oversights, like not doing gunshot residue tests, like what, and they knew the day of that, that the second shot, and they knew that Alex had lied about Charles standing for both shots. They knew as soon as they moved Charles' body and cleaned the blood off the floor that because of the scarring in the floorboard, they knew that he had already been down, so he was no longer a threat when Alex shot him the second time. Oh, we will do a whole live about some of those things. So I just wonder, there was a reference in the police report, even early on when they released a highly redacted police report, that there was blood on the aerator by the kitchen sink. And they took pictures of it, but didn't collect any for testing. So I'm like, well, what's the point of a picture? Like without testing. They eventually, I think it was like 3 months after Charles was killed. That's when I'll have to look up when they actually sent the bat for testing. It was quite a while after the shooting. Charles' fingerprints weren't on the bat. And they didn't test for Tylee's, so, I mean, there are a lot of gaps in this investigation. So whether it's fair or not, I suspect that they knew pretty early on that they had glossed over, and I'm being generous, that I believe there were some missteps. The due diligence was not exercised, in my opinion. I mean, just with the lies alone. There was a lie regarding Charles' phone, and I did a whole live even on the information that was out like back in 2020. Now there's even more information and more like really WTF moments, like why weren't they both arrested? But definitely Alex. It's like so yeah, so he wasn't allowed. And I will, of course, when I get to that live, I will present that evidence. Or join Cool Cats and Criminals. It's in there somewhere. Okay. All right. I'll go back to the most recent. If I don't see any questions, I'm going to bounce. Thank you, Kresha. Thank you. I read a very kind thing that you said, and then it shot up. Oh, she said, we still got a lot of work to do, and your big brother deserves to have his story told and justice served. And don't make me cry. Yes, I agree. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Oh. I see that Kresha is referencing a question she asked, but I haven't come across the question. Thank you, Denise. She said, no, it is not arrogance. It is so difficult to get information. It is. I'm sure law enforcement is like, why won't that aunt stay in her lane? Okay. All right. A concordance. I'm not sure what that's in reference to. Oh, Tiffany Garcia. Does anyone have too long didn't read? Like, is Adam Cox a friend or foe? I would lean to, I mean, it's a little dramatic, friend or foe. I went for some alliteration. I don't think he's actually a foe, but I will say I find many of his claims dubious. And yeah. So, one point, I wasn't sure whether to make this point, but as I was thinking through this whole issue of why wouldn't he, well, like, they're afraid, his son's afraid, his wife is afraid, everyone's afraid. Why wouldn't you call law enforcement? Like, let people know you have this fear. At least, if nothing else, it's documented. Like, if something happened, like, I had a stalker at one point. This was years and years ago. I took very specific notes and I told my best friend, I have these notes. They are on I told her where they were on my computer, because I didn't want to bog her down with concerns. I had gotten a restraining order against this person, and it wasn't even someone I knew. I had only met this person one time. There was like no romantic relationship, anything like that. Stalkers just stalk. But yeah, I just kept like really detailed notes, and she knew that this document was on I think I had it on my desktop, but I told her like the file name, and I just wanted her to know, like, if anything happens, I have these notes. I remember one time seeing a true crime episode where a woman, now I wish she had done more. Even with Charles, like, I've talked about this in the group that I'm in, but I think that there's not enough education done with men to talk to them about the dangers of domestic violence. Like, there was someone who, when I had this stalker, and it was this person had called into my work, made a threat. It was in the middle of the night, left a message on my boss's answering machine. And I got into work. I was an extremely private person, so no one knew that this was, going on. I just had notes on my desktop. So my best friend knew, but like no one at work. I wouldn't have talked to anyone at work. I get into the building, and they're like, we need you to stay in the inner perimeter. There's been this threat and all this stuff. So anyway, all this to say, someone told me, like, where to go to get this restraining order, and someone sat down with me. Like, you had to meet with this like kind of advocate in the courthouse, and she gave me specific advice. I was in this room with all of there were women with like black eyes, and it was so sad. But when I went in to talk to her, because you had to talk to this person before it went to the judge, I guess that person, kind of, they gave you an idea of how likely it was that you would get this the restraining order. And when I told her what had happened, she actually shut her office door, and she gave me really specific advice. she talked to me about go get pepper spray when you're walking in a parking lot. That's when women are often picked up. She said, never be on your phone. Don't look distracted. Don't have headphones and look in your back seat. I mean, she just like went down this list of stuff, and really specific advice. I mean, I remember sitting there just like so astounded, because at that point I was already watching true crime. I was like, how do I not know these things? So I realized they don't cover stuff like this in true crime. It's like only if you end up dead, so I had never thought about like carrying pepper spray and but yeah, so but I just don't think that this is done. If I had walked in looking like a buff guy like Charles, would I have been shown that extra, maybe. I mean, Charles was so desperate, maybe someone would have had compassion on him. But he talked to different people, and they're just like if you, God forbid, if you find yourself in a situation where things are getting tense, there are threats. When you do a drop off, you don't do it in a home. And I'm not in any way shaming Charles. I'm just saying, like, if he had been a woman, most likely someone would have told him, meet in a public place, like keep yourself safe. But anyway, and likewise, I don't think that law enforcement took him seriously back in January. I think they just saw this guy who's pretty buff, and they're like, what, this PYT who like was just in our office. In fact, the officers who met with Lori, Melanie, and Tylee gave, well, one officer in particular, I think his name was Officer Patelli, gave her very specific recommendations for how to evade the pickup order, going so far as to say, you know what, okay, between you, me, and the lamppost, if someone comes to your door, don't open the door. As long as there's a block between you and the police officer, he kept saying, we don't kick down doors for a pickup order. And, I mean, he went into, and he even gave her his diagnosis. He said, you don't seem, I think he said, crazy to me. He was like, you got your kids to school on time, as if that's somehow the bar. And there was one child, not kids. But clearly he wasn't in any way qualified. But I'm just saying, like, I just think that, some of this is there is a bias against men. I think it's a lot harder to see a man as a victim of domestic violence. So anyway, to make a short story very long. Okay, Rhonda asked, I'm sorry. Don't worry about apologizing if something was covered. Was there one specific thing that prompted Detective Moffat to distrust Adam? Yes, and he's very careful in referencing it, but pulling from two different references. One being what he actually said to Bobby about Adam. He said that looking at the phone records, Adam may have called Lori after talking to Charles. So and he was specifically talking about their interactions the day before Charles was murdered and the day of. And they didn't talk on the phone. There's no indication that they talked on the phone the day of. Charles was there like 7:37 in the morning. So this would have been the day before. And so they have some kind of record, or if someone is texting and maybe I don't know, but he had some kind of record that indicated that Adam called Lori after may have called Lori after talking to Charles. And so that was a big red flag. But then he also references text exchanges between Lori and Alex. And if I have the redaction correct, in that one of the last screenshots I shared, whoever is in that redaction, there was some kind of exchange between Lori and Melanie Van Boudreau, now Pulowski, that indicated someone was privy to this plan, and it's someone whose name they had redacted, and they do tend to redact. It's interesting, like different agencies have different thresholds for redactions. So even when I was going through these documents, like there were quite a few documents, like within the document, the fuller FOIA doc, that were triplicates. So you could tell they just kind of like took these documents from, it looked like 3 different agencies, and threw them all together. And so there were times, I shouldn't say this, but I just, whatever. They've already really, I don't think there are going to be any more FOIA docs. But there were times something would be redacted in one document, but not another document. So, the other side to that coin is I couldn't just read something once and say, oh, I've already read this. I've already taken screenshots or, done whatever, because I then pull up the other document and compare them to see if I could find any redactions. And in doing that, it's amazing the stuff I've found. Like I found someone's social security number. I have an entire spreadsheet. Anytime like a phone number is left unredacted or an email address, like I'm keeping track of these things. I don't know why. Sometimes they just prove to be useful because they'll refer to the last 4 digits of one of these players' phone number. And so I'll actually go to my notes and I'm like, that's Chad's burner phone, but anyway, so I found one phone number in the file name that was referenced in an email. So, okay. I'll do one more question and then I need my beauty suit. Sorry. I don't know where I read this, but is it true Adam lives at his mom's since he's divorced? I know, I don't know what has been verified publicly. There's been quite a bit of speculation that Nicole did not move with Adam when he moved to Utah, and that they were working on a divorce. So I was told by a source. I wish not that I would say who the source is, but I try to I try to think. I try to treat sources as like having batting records. I played softball for 9 years, but just like, okay, what was their batting record? Because there's some things that sources have told me, and I do try to be very, very careful with anything that's shared that's not in a FOIA doc, and I will only share those things as T when I feel like the source is trustworthy. Because there are people out there, they will claim anything, and I'm like, thanks, no thanks. But yeah, so I try to kind of make a mental note of like how trustworthy a particular source is, but in this case, I don't even remember who it was who told me. But I heard that he wasn't living with his parents now. So yeah, but I mean, it's a relatively small town, so it would be very difficult to believe that, like if I keep slipping off the table, it would be very difficult to believe like there are a million places he could have moved, even if he had decided to move. I know he lost his, at least there have been reports that he lost his job in Kansas, but like St. George, I'm sure there were other, you know, there were other cities he could have moved to. So that would be that would be asking a lot for us to believe that he's been cut off while living a stone's throw from his parents. Uh, okay. I see Kresha's question now. She asked, "What do you think eggs is code for?" I know, off topic. I know of someone that referred to it as um, like it's a street name for drugs. Full disclosure, I'm not a drug addict. I don't have friends who are dealers, so it's not like I would really. and it doesn't sound like I don't know. You just don't know with Lori, because there's sometimes I feel I've compared it to like playing chess with a chimp. Like you're trying to predict their next move, or you're trying to understand why they move their rook a certain way, and then they just pick up the chessboard and start eating it, and you're like, okay, I didn't call that one. That's how I feel sometimes with some of the stuff that Lori does. Lori, Chad, all of these players. Like, I mean, like, I feel like reading their text exchanges, I lost at least 27 IQ points. So I was just like, what the actual, yeah. But so I really don't know. And yeah. And some of those questions that are kind of like more curiosities, like I don't dismiss them. It's just I- if there's no real answer, I don't spend a whole lot of time thinking about them. Having said all of that, there's no question they were talking in code. There's also, in my opinion, and of course I will do a live about JJ. Um, Somehow. I probably won't go on camera, but but I I th- I personally believe, after watching the interview between um, Detective Hermosillo and Melanie Gibb, they were in the Chandler, I think it was Chandler Police Department. He really zeroed in on some text exchanges between Melanie and Lori was at Alex's. And I'm not saying this to say, oh, I called this one, because we don't even know yet where JJ, would, ultimately lost his life. But I've always suspected, wondered if apartment 107 was significant, because of early on, here you have Chad being so vague. Lori, no, I don't have her number. Well, yeah, you did. You're married to her. He references, I think, like not knowing her well or something. So he's being like Captain Vague. This is the day of the welfare check. Then they catch back up with him because he tries to leave, and they asked when and where, or maybe it was just when, he had last seen JJ. I think that's what they asked. And he said in October, which we know that was a lie. But then he's unnecessarily specific, and he says in apartment 107. And I don't remember what group I was in at the time. I think it might have been True Crime Underground, which was shut down. So it's not up there, but lots of people were in the group at that time. But I just said, I think JJ may have met his demise in apartment 107. So where am I going with this? Lori was in apartment 107. Yeah, and she was in Alex's apartment with JJ and references. I mean, first of all, she talks, it's like dinner time, or no, it was I think around 8 p.m. And and she talks about like something about like JJ having just woken up from a nap. So, and like anyone with kids, like, wait, it's happened to all of us, but she talks about needing to get JJ back down, and it's just like, okay, it's weird that JJ is waking up from a nap at 8 p.m. Sorry. But then, you're having to put him back down. And I've always had questions about their little field trip on Sunday. To look at the property. I do not, well, that will be another live. I won't go into that. I don't believe Melanie Gibbs' story that Lori wasn't on this outing. They were looking for where to put their tent city. She wasn't going to bow out of that. And David Warwick said she was on that outing. So, my mind went to, well, then who was with JJ? Like, if they're all on Sunday, and they both showed significant signs of deception and stuff. So much deception around the events of Sunday. Like, I mean, to a clownish level, like, I mean, I'm no fan of Pryor, but he's asking like really basic questions, and they're just like, oh, I don't know. Everyone went in different directions, and they didn't know when, they couldn't pinpoint when they went to the property and all of this stuff. So there's a lot of deception around Sunday. And then when the detail came out about Lori being with JJ around 8 p.m. So this would have been before they recorded their podcast. I suspect that JJ was murdered in apartment 107. I suspect that when Alex brought him in, he was already dead. I suspect that Melanie and David, I forget which one. I think it was David Warwick, who noted that he thought it was a tender moment, Alex carrying in JJ, and that seemed like an overstatement. But anyway, so all that to say, yeah, I do suspect that the egg reference is in reference to drugs. I don't necessarily think that that's because people on the streets are talking about like Molly as eggs. Maybe, who knows? Yeah. Okay. Thank you for joining me in this. I'm going to be here. I'm going to do quite a few of these, for better or for worse. Chew the meat, spit out the bones. And a big thank you to my mods. I will say one thing for the trolls that are out there, and I'm going to address this in the video with an overview. One of the things that I accounted for in moving forward with this is, can I handle just the flood of cruel troll comments? I still deal with them. I'm not trying to play the victim, anything like that. But, it's just a mental health consideration. Like, can I take that on again? I mean, I've had every accusation made against me, even that I had a criminal record, that I testified that my brother was a child molester. I mean, really horrible things. So I had reached out to a team of women from the Facebook group who I just really respect. They're people who they have different takes on this. Some are kind of more like black and white. This person's guilty. This person's a loser. Some are very, very gracious, And so I think it's a really good mix because I don't want to be like the emperor with no clothes. And I think it's good to just have that variety. But one of the things that I asked if they would be able to do is to review the comments. And so each one is going to take a separate week. I have enough mods. No, everyone will just have 1 week per quarter, and they will monitor the comments. I'm not being a princess about this. This was the main thing holding me back. Well, the other thing was I didn't want to bog down my analytics channel because I've gone back to, blogging and blogging about data. And so, that I addressed that with starting a new channel, but I just really didn't want exposure to all of the comments. So, if you think you're going to create account after account after account, and some of you, like, you're so obvious. You spell the same words the wrong way every time. There are certain things in your grammar. I'm just like, oh, brother, this person again, most likely. It will be for naught. You will be wasting your time because there will be a final sweep before I go in on a particular day, and I'm not going to see them. I've told them I don't want like all negative comments. It's not like a scrub. It's not that. I've even told them, even if someone passionately disagrees, like, people have made comments like, stop slandering Melanie Gibb. I'm like, oh, I will take that under advisement. No, and it's not slander. And first of all, it's not slander if it's true. And I am very, very careful in how I present these things. But it's also not slander if you just say, because I met with one of the top attorneys here in New York when I had a particular troll chasing after me, and she gave me the threshold for libel and slander. You can say pretty outrageous things and say it's my opinion, and it's not slander. So anyway, so I'm very, very careful. But even it's not even just to avoid lawsuits. I want to be a decent human being. I'm not trying to be unfair, cruel, all of these things. Having said that, if you're a troll, like, knock yourself out. Don't knock yourself out. You're wasting everyone's time. But if it's to somehow get some, additional dagger in about my brothers and my relationship being broken down, all of these different things. First of all, I've heard it all before. Secondly, I won't read it. So thank you for joining, and good night. I did address the cadence I'm going to be shooting for is about every other Friday. They will not be as long as this one. I really wanted to be especially careful with this one. So, but thank you for joining. Good night.